Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order this public hearing of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. It is 6:33 p.m. on July 13th, 2017, and we're in room A, I think, of Edward J. Prisbila Center. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm Councilmember Mary Che. I represent Ward 3, and I'm the chair of this committee. And I'm going to run this hearing jointly with Councilmember McDuffie. Actually, it's going to be primarily his hearing, but I'm convening it. Now, for some time, and you're not alone in this, we've heard concerns from across the district related to the lines of communication between the District Department of Transportation, residents, and the advisory neighborhood commissioners regarding ongoing projects, constituent inquiries, and even ANC resolutions. The council has experienced itself some difficulties in its attempts to get clarification from the agency regarding constituent service issues. Indeed, I myself have sent 3 letters to DDOT in the past 2 months and have not yet received a response to those inquiries. Unfortunately, this issue is not an isolated one, as many witnesses and several fellow council members, including my colleague, Councilmember McDuffie, attested to at DDOT's budget oversight hearing last April. Since that time, DDOT has made some changes to the good. It's assured the committee that the recent reconfiguration pursuant to the Transportation Reorganization Amendment Act of 2016 will improve its responsiveness to residents and to legislative inquiries. And the agency has taken further positive action to reinforce its performance division, which serves as the agency's customer service center, by hiring additional personnel dedicated to public outreach. Indeed, aware of DDOT's role as one of the district's most public-facing agencies, the committee has also taken steps to assist DDOT in its efforts to expand its public outreach program by providing, just in this past budget season, I put money in the budget starting in fiscal 2018 to add 3 additional employees, these are additional employees, to serve as intra-governmental liaisons. I think those actions, together with the ones I mentioned, will be helpful in bridging the communication gap between the agency, the public, and the council, and I look forward to seeing results of those efforts throughout this next fiscal year. In the interim, though, I've convened this public roundtable to provide DDOT with an opportunity to describe what its actions have been, what it's done to address communication issues, and to give the agency a chance to describe its plan of action moving forward to ensure that residents can readily access and receive DDOT services in a satisfactory, professional, responsible, and timely manner. Additionally, I'd like to determine if there are additional resources that maybe the agency still needs to meet its obligations to answer the questions and concerns that you all may have, or as individuals, but also advisory neighborhood commissions and the council itself, as I've mentioned. For today's roundtable, because this is a formal meeting of the council, we'll follow the committee's normal practice and hear public witnesses first, followed by our government witness. Public witnesses, you'll have 3 minutes to present your testimony if you're an individual. You'll have 5 minutes if you represent an organization. So I'd like to start by calling the witnesses that we have. Now we have 4 chairs, but 3 mics, so you have to be friendly and accommodating to each other when you come up. I'm going to start first with Sandra Lucas, a public witness. Sandra Lucas here. Corrine Steiner, a public witness. Did they hear about a better hearing somewhere? Okay, Leroy Morgan, a public witness. I'm feeling, sad now. Elise Scott, BNCA. Oh, thank you. And you'll tell us what, or me anyway, what BNCA means. Kelly Sislow, a public witness. Bill Yelverton, who is a public witness. Mr. Yelverton. Derek Davis. There's a clerk here, so if you have written testimony, please present it to the clerk. And I suppose I should tell you that this is being recorded and filmed. and so you might want to take that into account for whatever reasons. I start on my left, your right. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's customary to give another council member an opportunity to make an opening statement, and I forgot that. I had a hearing today of many hours, and so I'm a little off key. Councilmember McDuffie, do you have an opening statement?
I do, Councilmember Shea. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. I requested that you hold this roundtable, Councilmember, because a lot of Ward 5 residents are simply tired and frustrated with the Department of Transportation. Furthermore, the lack of response from DDOT is the leading cause of apathy among many Ward 5 residents with respect to their government. They know that DDOT is a well-funded executive agency tasked with carrying out their requests, and they have expressed dissatisfaction with DDOT's recent work in the community or lack thereof. Because of a growing frustration with DDOT's responses to community concerns, I felt it was necessary to do more than mere correspondence. However, the bottom line is this. The council provides rigorous oversight of agencies. However, council members don't execute and fulfill service requests. Occasionally we pick up trash and things like that, but it is ultimately—
Wait a minute, you're not filling the potholes yourself?
You probably wouldn't want me to fill a pothole, Councilmember Shea. The responsibility rests solely with the executive and direct reports in agencies like DDOT and other agencies like the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. As a member of the Council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment, my authority is to conduct, along with my chairperson, oversight when things aren't working effortlessly and seamlessly. And that's why we're here today. While I'm not thrilled that a roundtable like this is necessary to illustrate the frustration that several residents have expressed in my office, I am pleased that residents finally have an opportunity to have a direct dialogue with the Department of Transportation. I'm also very pleased to have very many ANC commissioners represented and several civic associations as well. For all of the very important, innovative, and progressive transportation programs and initiatives we have in the district, there are several requests in this ward that are just not properly handled by certain agencies. As I've stated before, this is unacceptable. DDOT must do a better job. DDOT has got to walk and chew gum at the same time, and it's insufficient to effortlessly execute progressive objectives such as dedicated bike lanes and energy-saving initiatives. While sidewalks go unpaved, trees remain imminent threats to residents' homes. Certainly I'm not exaggerating because I know there's some residents who've experienced this. Chairperson Che, with your indulgence, I'd like to share just a few experiences. Although it's not an exhaustive list, it does properly, I think, convey the impetus of today's roundtable. Ms. Pico, a legally blind senior, came to my office and asked that I have DDOT remove a tree that was looming over her home. DDOT promptly went to her home, but they determined that the tree was fine and didn't need to be removed. 4 days later, a terrible storm ripped through the district and the tree fell directly onto Ms. Pico's roof. During the middle of the night, she was forced to get a hotel. Since many of the trees were planted before the sidewalks were installed, this is an issue for several residents throughout Ward 5. Ms. Earlene Frazier showed me a documented history spanning over 7 years of requesting sidewalk repair on her block. Ms. Barbara Lee, Rosa Hodges, and Martha Hall all raised similar issues. Ms. Penn and Carlos Davis conducted a walkthrough of the Woodridge South neighborhood. There they highlighted the obvious traffic calming needs at the intersection of Bladensburg Road and South Dakota Avenue. Although the community in my office have urged DDOT to install more traffic calming measures, unfortunately that intersection remains dangerous to date. In Fort Lincoln, my staff and I sat with Ms. Gilliam, an 80 years young resident. She showed us the challenges she and her neighbors face while trying to merge into overwhelming and dangerous traffic. Still, those issues remain unresolved. In 5D, ANC 5D, pedestrian crosswalks have not been painted, even though added funding to the FY 2016 budget has been there to address this issue. DDOT simply did not paint them, which was very disappointing to residents there. Again, another reason why we're here today. In fiscal year 2016 as well, the budget, I secured $250,000 to address persistent issues at the Truxton Circle. DDOT held meetings, but subsequently there's been no result or work done to address the issues that remain to date. That area is in 5E, where I think I saw some ANC commissioners from that neighborhood. DDOT staff and I all sat at 13th and Franklin and watched the dangerous traffic there. Although DDOT has provided some relief, that intersection remains dangerous, and DDOT will not agree to what residents believe are common sense fixes. This only increases community's frustration, and I imagine we're going to hear that from some of our witnesses in just a few moments. Today, I'm hopeful that DDOT will listen closely to residents' concerns and frustrations and work cooperatively with my office, with the committee, and the community to adequately and finally address these persistent issues. I want to thank you again, Chairperson Che, for agreeing to hold this roundtable in the community. I want to thank Director Jones-Joe for being here. And I look forward to hopefully a productive roundtable and even more productive results that are delivered to the communities who are represented here today in Ward 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. As I said, I start on my left, your right witness panel. So that would mean you, Mr. Derek Davis, go first, and as a public witness, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Councilmember and Chair Shea, Councilmember McDuffie, Councilmember Grosso. My name is Derek Davis, and I am a proud business owner and taxpayer of a Davis Barber and Beauty Service in Ward 8 for 49 years. I'm honored to come before you today. I want to thank you for this opportunity to appear here today before you to discuss my sidewalk repair issue. Let me begin my testimony by sharing the history of the sidewalk issue. And I submitted testimony on there's a paper that shows that on September the 26th, 2013, sidewalk located at 4646 Livingston Road Southeast. Thank you. Livingston Road was confirmed as a DC property and approved for full repair, the sidewalk. However, as of today, this has failed to be completed. The paper mark number 1 says, I am responsible for sidewalk repair. If this is the case, how is it that on 6th and Chesapeake Southeast, the same type of business corridor, had their entire sidewalk repaired from the opening from where you step out the business to the curve? It seems to me, again, this doesn't seem like a level playing field, and it seems to be personal. While my business has been proactive in our community, providing free back-to-school haircuts, a venue for books in the barbershops, and various other city events, it amazes me to think DDOT cannot provide a sidewalk repair where many seniors and children walk daily. I'm asking for a reconsideration to repair the sidewalk at 4646 Livingston Road corridor. And in these documents, you'll show where a person named from DDOT, I think it's Tyrone Jones, said that I own the sidewalk. And I've never heard of such. And I think a lot of people agree with me that I've never known that I own the sidewalk. And if it's the case, if I own the sidewalk, can I put a fence up around it? Right. I mean, I'm very disappointed and unclear where we headed with this, because like I said, in 2013, DDOT approved it to have a sidewalk. And then as of today, I still don't have a sidewalk. And DDOT now says that I own it. I'm just not get it. A guy named Lee Wilson from DDOT came to have a big project over there on South Capitol, 7th Avenue, 3rd Street, 4th Street, big sidewalk repair. But one less than 50 feet from where my business is located, I can't get a sidewalk. Multi-million-dollar project. I don't understand it. So I see that my time's up. There's other stuff in there. I'm prepared to answer any questions if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Yelverton?
Yes.
And can you share the mic? See, this is the sharing part.
Yes, William Yelverton, 2803 13th Street, Northeast. Yeah, I've been living in property for approximately 23 years. And we have a serious problem there. First, we used to have so much problem at the stoplight at 13th and Franklin. It was accident there about at least once a month. And so now it's the truck traffic, the problem. we have so many trucks coming through there until, you know, I mean, sometimes you, early in the morning, you wake up and all you hear is truck noise. It starts sometime at 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's unnecessary. And first, they used to have a sign right after you come off Rhode Island Avenue going west and on Franklin Street. It used to be a sign there that was said, you know, I think it was about the actually it was a weight limit. And now that sign is gone. And so now, you know, like when I used to drive trucks, whenever I come through a place like that, I would always look for a sign say weight limit. If I know if it was mean that it was wrong, I wouldn't go that way. But when they take signs and stuff like that, truck drivers, they look for stuff like that. So now if they don't see a sign, they're gonna shoot right through there and tell their buddies there's no sign there. And they used to have a weight station there. Not a weight station, but they used to weight trucks every once in a while through there. But now you never see it. And trucks just bow through there. I mean, it's just a freeway through there for trucks. And I think that's wrong. Because you know, we pay our taxes and everything, but we can't get no peace, you know, for trucks. And I know it should be something done, because if they did nothing else, they could put a weight limit on some of these trucks, and they wouldn't come through there. If they know they would get fined for being overweight, they wouldn't be coming through there keeping all that noise. And so I think something should be done about it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yelverton. Ms. Sislo?
Yes, good evening. Thank you all. I appreciate you guys having this meeting. I have 4 major points that I want to address and several subpoints. The first one is we had a meeting March 13th. Elise provided video testimony, a slew of suggestions, recommendations. I sent a follow-up email to you, Ms. Che, April, and then again in May, no response. We reached out again to Mr. McDuffie's staff and got some traction to get this meeting set up. I want to start by first speaking to the truck and traffic issue, which Bill just spoke to. And by trucks, we're not complaining about the UPS delivery trucks or the Pepsi delivering trucks. We're really talking about the construction vehicles, the very large ones, okay? And there's a couple of points I want to make here. First, could you commit to conducting an official air quality test in our neighborhood? This is necessary because of the large volume of the huge trucks, and we see them polluting. I don't live at that intersection. I live on Monroe, but I'm at that intersection several times a day, and I see it in the air. And we have what appear to be these factories over by Home Depot, and everybody in our neighborhood complains about some sweet smell in the air, and it's not marijuana. It's something else. And I have asthma, and it does trigger my asthma. So I would like the city to do an air quality test. I think that's a fair thing to ask. The second thing is, can you commit to providing MPD with additional funding and staff to grow the enforcement team that was able to stop several trucks on Monroe after I posted in May? I believe there was one arrest. I don't know what the rationale was for the arrest, but numerous citations, and it brought in almost $3,000 in revenue. I would venture to say that if you staffed up that team, the revenue from stopping these trucks alone would pay for that staff. And it doesn't have to be long-term. It could be forever long we need it. But I think the number of resources that they have having to share across the city, we're not going to see this unless you staff them properly, okay? The next one is, what is the difference between the green no truck signs and the white no truck signs, and why the difference? And I don't expect you to answer these today, but my last point, I'll speak to what I want to have as a plan. And then at the corner of 4th and Rhode Island Avenue, northeast, there is an official sign. It says quiet zone. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. What about that intersection allows them to have a quiet zone? I mean, really? And my next point is responsibility and communication to the community. As a council member or a DDOT representative, can you please elaborate on what you believe your individual responsibilities should be to the residents of the neighborhood streets that are impacted by the decisions made by the council and DDOT, particularly when those decisions negatively impact the quality of life, the foundations of our homes, cost to repair, and quite possibly even the resale value? And when decisions are made that impact the volume of traffic or the type of traffic, how are the residents and community notified and or consulted? Is my time up? No,
Quite so.
Darn, okay.
Thank you.
3 minutes goes fast.
It
Okay.
does.
Well, I've emailed you all of this. But the last thing, which is most important, is action plan and next steps. I don't want to see what happened in March where it went out the window. We need an action plan, immediate next steps that come out within a week, and a monthly meeting where we have follow-up and traction. I think that's only fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Scott? Ms. Scott, what is BNCA?
The Brookland Civic Association.
Okay, so you'll have 5 minutes as a
Yes.
representative of that
Yes.
organization.
Okay, so I'm Elise Scott. I represent the BNCA, and I'm a resident of 13th Street at the corner of Franklin. I testified to this council and you, Ms. Che, 4 months ago today, actually, with regard to problems on Franklin and 13th Street. I submitted a video, pages of photos showing how overweight construction trucks are overrunning both streets and Brookland at large. What is disturbing is that there's been little to no response from that testimony and no help from DDOT or the mayor to find a way to mitigate the problem. did send a representative to our Civic Association meeting on June 20th to speak with its members and officers. The prevailing response as to why they aren't interested in working with the community is that DDOT doesn't want to limit the transportation of goods and services and falls back on federal highway guidelines, which they are in fact part of drafting. The residents of both Franklin and 13th have requested help for well over 2 years and solutions to help mitigate this dangerous corridor. At best, we are met with indifference and a lack of response to find a solution. This is evidenced by the recent removal of the weighted no truck sign that Mr. Yelverton just spoke about. That's been in place for years.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you? Could you pull the mic a little closer to you and not picking it up?
I'm sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
The removal of this.
Okay, so this is evidenced by the recent removal of the weighted no truck sign at RIA and Rhode Island Avenue and 13th Street. And you, Ms. Che, stated yourself at the last Oversight meeting that trucks were not allowed on 13th Street, and yet there they are. The removal of the signs was done within the last week leading up to this roundtable tonight, and right after the DDOT representative became aware of both these signs at our meeting on June 20th. This has sent a very clear and defining message to the tax-paying residents of those streets, Brookland and Ward 5 in general, that DDOT has no interest in working with the community to find solutions to keep people safe. It's equivalent to a slap in the face. When asked why they can't stop truck travel manifests and put a weight limit, they are silent. My guess is because it's an actual solution, but they're not willing to do it. Since the sign removal this week, more trucks have used Franklin and 13th Street, and it's gotten worse, if that's even possible. Houses shake, foundations are cracking, people can't sleep because they start at 4 a.m. and go till 9 at night, 6 days a week. The air quality is flooded with black exhaust, and they speed through honking at passenger cars that are making left or right turns. It is a menace to the community. As stated in my prior testimony, this is a residential street with yards, driveways, Noyes Elementary School. People actually park on that street and are afraid of being run over if they get out of their cars. DDOT has said that there are less trucks on Franklin than Rhode Island Avenue, which is likely correct because Rhode Island Avenue is a 4-lane highway. And both Franklin and 13th are narrow streets. This is not fair or an accurate comparison. They estimated that 45 trucks drive through an hour. I've counted 90 in an hour on many days around noontime, 90. If their stat is correct, which I highly doubt given video footage and photos, 45 heavyweight construction trucks is almost 1 per minute, and that's unacceptable for a tree-lined narrow street that's residential with children and families. There's also DDOT's lack of interest in placing requested red light and speed cameras at 12th, 13th, and 14th in Franklin. Instead, they placed a speed camera 200 feet from the corner, which only catches a fraction of the traffic and speeding on Franklin, and no one actually running that light. This request is not unreasonable. We all know that other communities and other wards, such as Georgetown and parts of Northwest, have strict rules in place to limit travel of commercial construction trucks on residential roads. I presented exhibits with photos to your staff member there, that there are still signs at the corner of 13th and Michigan restricting trucks on 13th Street, but DDOT removed the one at 13th and Rhode Island. There are no signs all along 12th Street, which is zoned commercial. It's also at the corner of 12th and Michigan. No trucks on Taylor at 12th and 13th, a busier road than Franklin. Well, Franklin's now becoming as busy. So why is Franklin and 13th being singled out, and why isn't there a willingness to find a solution, which is what we want? Why won't the council, DDOT, mayor's office work with us in the community and residents to find a solution? We are asking for the enforceable weight limit signs to be put back so that these trucks can use Rhode Island Avenue. It's a 4-block detour, that's it. They can go around homes and schools. We're not looking to stop emergency vehicles, trash collection, local deliveries, but to stop the back and forth of large construction to and from construction sites carrying debris and ruining our deserved quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions, and of course I'll give it to Councilmember McDuffie. Mr. Davis, when you said that you were told you're responsible for this sidewalk, can you just describe for me, is it a regular sidewalk? Is it the sidewalk up to your store? I'm not clear.
Well, yes, it's up to the store. I provided pictures in my
Okay.
testimony of both things that I'm talking about.
Oh, yes, that's right. You need to, I'm sorry.
Yes, I provided pictures with my testimony to show you the cracked sidewalk, how it abuts my property. I also have drawings, the original drawings of the property.
No, excuse me. I'm trying to understand something. A cracked sidewalk, the public sidewalk obviously should be fixed, but are you talking about the sidewalk from the public way to your store?
I'm talking about.
Is there a separate, I'm trying to find it, is there a separate sidewalk? For example, you know how we have homes sometimes and there's a sidewalk and then a person might have his or her own sidewalk up to their front door. Is that what we're talking about, or we're talking about the sidewalk?
Could you show the picture, please? I mean, for me to explain it as opposed to you seeing. It's a single picture that looks just like this. And maybe that would help you understand. It's a single picture.
Because if
That
it's
one
the
right there.
public sidewalk, then the government is responsible
That's
for
a
the
public
sidewalk.
sidewalk.
Okay.
As soon as you walk out my door, that's the sidewalk. Now, if you look at the one right here that has 3 pictures on it, it's the same commercial corridor located on 6th and Chesapeake. As soon as you walk out of any of these business, they did the whole sidewalk up to the door. So I'm not getting it. And this guy, Mr. Jones, sent out an email.
I understand now, and you're quite
Okay.
correct. That's a public sidewalk. I don't know
Yes.
what the story is
In
there.
on September the 26th of 2013, DDOT said it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was. I have the email, and that's in your testimonies, in my testimony copy. And then I get an email yesterday, June the 26th, from this guy named Mr. Jones from DDOT, and said, I own the sidewalk.
Right. Well, I guess they're just in the wrong. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, I need help, because this
Okay.
issue's been going on since 2013.
Well, for all of the witnesses here, we have Director Dormsjo seated right there. So all of the things that you're mentioning, I assume he's taking notes, or he has someone taking notes. You can have a more direct audience to the person who can help you, okay?
Can we get his contact information? I didn't have it when I sent my testimony, so if I could get his contact information, I'm happy to send you my
Okay.
testimony.
Perfect. And then, Mr. Yelverton, I wanted to ask you something, and maybe everybody's also on the same page about this, Ms. Scott, Ms. Sislo. Is this area, this Franklin Street with the trucks, is that also your issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
And, you
Well,
know,
it's Franklin and 13th is a
Franklin,
major
13th.
intersection,
Right, so
but
I'm
I
trying-
live on Monroe,
Okay.
so I don't want to exclude
okay,
Monroe.
let's break it down a little bit, though. So is the issue whether trucks can travel there, or what the regulation is? I'm not sure. But if they can't, is it then because there's no effective signage there?
There are many issues. Do you mind me speaking
Yeah,
about it?
you should speak.
So there were weighted signs, as Bill had said. They were taken down within the last week. I testified to you 4 months ago that those weighted signs were there. We needed more help with MPD and DDOT to restrict that. So now that they've taken the signs, it's a free-for-all. But
Okay,
basically,
but let me ask you, wait, stop, please. So I got to get this. So you wanted more help to restrict it even further, not just to restore what was there?
There were signs there, from my understanding, that
Right.
on other corners that were taken down. We were asking for those to be put up.
Okay, that's one thing.
That's one.
And then second thing is you wanted a further restriction beyond those signs being put up?
Yeah, the trucks, yeah, enforcement of it.
Oh,
They
okay,
still
so
keep coming.
enforcement. So, and then you mentioned MPD, all right? The council does not assign MPD, but here's what happens in my ward.
Okay.
I'll call the commander of 2D, which is in my ward, and I'll say, we have a problem over there. Please send out extra personnel. Let's say people are running stop signs or whatever it is they're doing, flouting the law. They'll send out a team, they'll start ticketing, and they'll get results. But of course, they can't devote that amount of
understand.
personnel there permanently. So what'll happen is they'll go away, and it'll be good for a while, and then they'll, sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's good and it lapses. And then when that happens, they go out again. So what we need is, what's your district, 5D, I guess?
It's Commander
It's
Fitzgerald.
ANC 5. That area is ANC 5.
No, I mean the MPD.
Oh, it's 5D.
5D, okay.
Yeah.
So what we need is commander of that, Commander Fitzgerald. We need to, your council member can request that there be extra personnel put out there. We do need the signs replaced, though, so that the
Right,
police have an
right,
occasion to
right.
say, you're not supposed to be here.
MPD actually sent notes to DDOT, because this has been going on for 2 years, asking for their help with that, and they've gotten no response. And what I'd like to say is, part of the problem with what's happening on both these streets are signed truck manifests, which are commercial vehicles that have to, when there's a development, they go to DDOT and they have to say where their trucks are going to go through the city, so they can't just roam anywhere. So then DDOT has to say, okay, this is an accepted route. So I've brought this up many times. This is now they've now signed off on this as a truck manifest, and I know this because I live on this corner and I see these guys go by 100 times a day with debris. I know who some of the companies are that are being allowed to go through. 90 a minute, an hour, 90 on any given day.
Okay, so it's not just the signage. Even if the signage were back up, you're saying that DDOT is giving them special dispensation to run
I
there.
believe that they are.
Okay. And then we need the signs back up. We need the special dispensation to be questioned. And then we need the police to be asked to go out.
Right.
They are.
Yeah, and that's to my point, that there needs
Okay.
to be some additional funding, because I believe they said there's only 5 or 7 of these MPD traffic police to do this across the whole city. So
Well,
that's not sufficient.
I'll let your council member speak to the funding, but that's an issue that neither he nor I have jurisdiction over in terms of funding and then allocating police officers to a particular division. That micromanaging of the executive branch and the police department is not something that we do.
Right.
But in any case, I think I have a better understanding, and I'm getting that understanding in order to convey through me to the director what your concerns are.
I don't know if you were able to look at my exhibits, but it will show you that there are signs prohibiting, if we just speak about 13th Street, which also crosses over Franklin. You yourself at the last testimony, I believe, had somebody research on the spot that 13th Street is not zoned for trucks, that 12th is because it's commercial, and yet it is a free-for-all. And they're letting them come through. We need help.
Okay? They need enforcement.
Can I, do you?
I'm turning it to you.
Okay, I just wanted to make a quick comment. So while I've already requested that MPD enforce, and actually MPD has been out to do some enforcement, I think the larger issue is what Ms. Scott and Ms. Sislo stated, and as well as Mr. Yelverton stated about the manifest issue. The question, I think, for Director Dormjo and the folks at DDOT is whether or not they need to allow these trucks to take that route. These folks who are doing work in construction zones and other places, the question is, should they be allowed to come through there, and whether DDOT, if they are allowing them to do so by signing off on the manifest, and if they are allowing them to do so, the question is, should they continue to allow them to do so? And so we've already requested enforcement. In fact, MPD has been out there. We could ask for more enforcement, but I think ultimately the decision needs to be made as to whether or not that needs to be a route for trucks. And it's confusing because you already have certain signs that say one thing, certain signs that have been removed in other places. And so It's frustrating for residents, but I imagine it might be slightly confusing for some of the truck drivers as well. And so I think the question for DDOT is whether or not it should be permitted on the street.
May I make a comment to that? My understanding is that they offer a solution if MPD can't be there regularly, which are called, I don't know if I'm getting the term correct, but they're laser lights, I guess, that when a truck over a certain weight comes through, it triggers a fine to the company.
Yeah.
I've contacted DDOT and the people that install that many times about it because MPD can't be there all the time. They're worrying about crime, and I get that. So I believe there must be, I'm hoping there's money in your budget for something like that, like speed cameras that stop people from doing 100 miles an hour or trucks coming through.
No, they're MPD.
Okay. So the weight cameras, a lot of folks may be familiar with. We've seen them they've had them at Taylor Street over the bridge in the past. They've had them on, I believe, 12th Street even. I know there's a speed camera on 12th Street close to Michigan, but I think once upon a time they may even had a weight camera at that location as well. Those cameras, I understand, are within the budget of the Metropolitan Police Department. I'm not a member of that committee anymore. I used to chair it. But they have over a $500 million budget. So I don't know if the question of whether or not they have funds is an issue. And it's something that we can ask the director when he comes up.
There are many signs in Northwest. I'm very familiar with truck manifests and travel through Georgetown, given my experience. And also in Northwest, there are many trucks that will say trucks use Connecticut Avenue or Wisconsin Avenue. There's no reason why trucks can't use Rhode Island Avenue for a 4-block detour on a narrow street with a school. They're just pounding the homes. It's not good. It starts at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I believe there are other residents from that street that will be testifying about that.
Can I make another comment?
Yeah, the cameras we're referring to are oversized commercial vehicle cameras.
Yep.
And we've seen them in Ward 5. We've seen them in other parts of the city.
It helps retrain, right?
Right. Just really quick, though, if I could, Ms. Sislo, you mentioned an air quality test. I just want to make sure. Were you referring to the same intersection at 13th and Franklin or a different one?
I don't think it's isolated just to there.
Okay.
People that live on Monroe, Otis, Newton have all commented on a sweet smell.
In the area around
Yeah.
12th and 13th, primarily?
Our ANC's aware of it too.
Yeah, I think it's throughout our neighborhood. I don't think it's just at one particular intersection. I don't know if that means you have to do an air quality test at each intersection. I don't know that much about it, but
Well, it's probably something we should involve the Department of Environment with. And Councilmember Cherry has been an ally in working with me as Ward 5 Councilmember, a host of our environmental issues throughout Ward 5, because you all know we have the bulk of the industrial land in the ward, and so we've done some things about adding funding to the budget for more inspectors. We increased the amount of fines for folks who violate the law. We've done a host of other things to try to address those issues as well. So.
okay. Can I make?
Councilmember Che,
Yes.
just wanna, also on my folder, you'll find this. This is from DDOT itself. This gentleman, Mr. Lee Wilson, has been in my business twice. It said we
You know what, you
south.
still need the mic. I keep forgetting myself, but
Yeah, I forget too, but I won't forget this. Mr. Lee Wilson from DDOT has been in my business twice and left this in his handwriting that said we were going to get sidewalk, and all of a sudden it disappeared this year. You know, something's fishy here. I don't know what it is, but we need to get to the bottom of it.
all right. Well, thank you, and thank you to this panel. I appreciate your coming forward.
Ms. Chair, can I just make one other comment regarding the manifests, right? And to Mr. Drumjo, is that how you pronounce it? My question that I presented to them earlier was, what do you consider your individual responsibility to be to the community when you make decisions to sign off on manifests? I don't live at Franklin and 13th, I live on Monroe. We have a lot of construction going on. I don't want to have what happened there happen on my street. So I want and I expect that you guys in public service take a personal responsibility and consider how you impact people's lives. You know, you ought to go live in some of these houses for a day. A lot of people work from home nowadays, and I can't tell you the communication back and forth on our listserv about, you know, the shaking of the windows, you know, even on a conference call, there's disturbances. You have to be on mute the whole time. So please take that in consideration. Don't let this die on the vine tonight. We're not going to let it go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'd like to call now, please, Laura Jackson, Stronghold Civic Association. Is Ms. Jackson here?
She's here.
Sakari Smith, a public witness. Oh, okay. Gordon Andrew Fletcher, ANC Commissioner 5A08.
He's here.
And Charles Lockett, a public witness.
He's here.
So, Commissioner, you have put yourself in the hot seat since I start from my left, your right. So, and you'll have 5 minutes for your testimony. So, whenever you're ready, we'll hear it.
No problem. Thank you very much, Council Member. Good evening, the Honorable
evening.
Council Members McDuffie and Council Member Che. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you for hosting the Roundtable in the community on District Department of Transportation. As an ANC Commissioner representing single-member district SMD 5808, I believe that two of the most important duties of any elected official or governmental agency in the District of Columbia is to be responsive to constituent concerns and to be proactive rather than reactive to foreseeable problems. With that being said, I also understand that the government cannot be all things to all people all the time. Therefore, there's a balance between the two that must be achieved. SMD 5808 encompasses both Fort Totten and the North Michigan Park area, which will be the areas of focus of my testimony. There has been a significant and transformative development boom within SMD 5808 within the last 10 years. The development boom within SMD 5808 includes Our Place at Fort Totten, which has 520 residential units, Aventine at Fort Totten, which has 308 apartments, Emerson Park, which has 75 townhomes, and Fort Totten Muse, which is projected to have 40 townhomes. Each development is within a single square mile of the Fort Totten Metro. Therefore, there has been significant increase in the population of this area and those frequenting it as well. Moreover, after listening to many residents within my SMD, going on a community walk of my SMD with the mayor's office, and seeing the type of services being provided in other areas of the city, I can confidently state that the Fort Totten and North Michigan Park area has been overlooked far too long. The issues that I would like to bring to your attention in particular are, first, lack of response for low-hanging tree limbs, sidewalk repairs, and speed bumps for neighborhoods experiencing increased car traffic. For example, broken concrete at 5216 to 52222 4th Street Northeast, broken concrete at 5223 4th Street Northeast, and tree issues at 701 Crittenden Street Northeast. All of these and more have been placed into 311 service requests. The second issue, a resident who lives at 705 Crittenden Street Northeast has contacted 311 numerous times requesting pruning of a large oak tree located in front of their home. There are many elderly residents that live on Crittenden, and many are afraid that the tree limb will fall on them. There have been multiple requests made concerning this tree. The request numbers are as follows, and I've given them to you in the written testimony. I won't say them now, but one of the requests was first initiated, I believe, December of 2016, and it was closed out for some reason, but the issue is still ongoing. The third issue, there's a concern about traffic control at the site of the Totten Muse development, which is next to the Capital Area Food Bank. The residents on 6th Street are concerned about the traffic at the dead end, traffic from Fort Totten Muse, and traffic from pedestrians walking from the Fort Totten Metro. The fourth issue, lack of walkability on the east side of Fort Totten Metro, which is the southern portion of Gallatin Street Northeast between South Dakota Avenue and 4th Street Northeast. And lastly, there's no paved path there's no paved path through the National Park Service land between Gallatin and Galloway Streets. Thank you for listening to my testimony, which encompassed the concerns that I've heard from residents in SMD 508 and the District of Columbia and Ward 5 as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Mr. Lockett?
Yes, ma'am. How's everyone this evening?
Good evening.
I've been a resident here for 65 years. I've lived in Ward 5 for 40 years. I'm also a I'm also a decorated Vietnam veteran. I lost half my gut in Vietnam. I'm a 33-year retired federal employee who managed the Naval Observatory for 14 years and ended my career at Fort Meade. I've not seen so much change in this community and building in Ward 5. What I've seen in 2 years, I've not seen in 40 years. My neighbors and I fought DDOT for 7 years to do some repairs to South Dakota Avenue. It took 7 on your side to come out to get them to do repairs of the 4900 block, 4800 block, up to Gallatin of South Dakota Avenue. It was reported that the homes were rocking, that ceilings had fell in, even one of mine, and nobody from the DC government ever came out. No one. 7 years it took us to do that. And I'm glad the ANC commissioner is sitting here. I reported to him for the last year since he's been at the meetings and become the ANC commissioner. If you go to the 5100 block of South Dakota Avenue, where UDC is now, 2.5 years I've asked, could you just repair that part of the road? Potholes are sitting there for 2.5 years. And the mayor tells me we need to wait till the developer finish. Well, what's going to happen to our cars? What happens to the people who may fall over and try to dodge potholes and run into someone? The streets in DC are bad. Eastern Avenue, Blair Road, all your short streets. Now, when we talk about the traffic on South Dakota Avenue, when that development started up the street there, nobody came for controlling traffic. The truck goes up the street weighing 1 ton, comes back down the street weighing 10 tons. So you know what the vibration does. Never do we see what you call the vehicle that comes out and does the weight, the police department. I might have seen them twice in 2 years. No cameras at all. We've asked for them. They put some little lines on the road there. This is not fair to the tax people. The trucks come into our neighborhood, close off our streets anytime they feel like it. You call downtown, nothing is done. Nothing is done. And it's been going on for a long while. In South Dakota, 12th Street, Allison. Just the other day, the zoning commission approved a building to be built in back of the Catholic facility there, directly across the street from an emergency room. It's the traffic at that intersection of 12th and Allison has been a major problem for 10 years. And you approved to have more traffic put in there now and blocking the emergency room? Unfair. Thank you.
Thank you.
One, ma'am.
Yes.
If someone could look into the ANC commissioners in that particular area who are voting on things that they do not know anything about, building, roads, and things like that, they are approving things that they have no information on, and it's wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Lockett. Ms. Smith?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm here to talk about what Elise Scott was talking about. I live at 1310 Franklin. It's loud. The trucks are permitted. When I first moved there 27 years ago, a young lady was floating a petition about the same thing. The problem has gotten worse. We are not talking about Metro access vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars. We are talking about Metro buses that are out of service, UPS truck convoys, not UPS trucks that are servicing individuals, beer trucks, the big ones, cement trucks, other loud vehicles, construction trucks, and that kind of thing. And I'm simply here to witness what Elise Scott has already said. It's loud, it's noisy, it's getting worse. The end.
Thank you. That was very concise. I appreciate that. Ms. Jackson?
Good evening, and thank you so much for having this roundtable. Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Project.
Okay. Okay. Okay, these are traffic concerns and questions that we submitted to DDOT in May of 2016. And since that time, we have been working with various representatives of DDOT, and every time we thought that we had something going and they were going to resolve some of these issues, we wouldn't hear anything, follow up, and find out that that person has been replaced. So I'm going to read these briefly because I know you have a long list, and have them in the record. Stronghold includes the unit blocks of Bryant, Channing, Douglas, Evarts, Franklin, and Girard Streets Northeast. It is bounded by North Capitol Street Northeast to the west and Michigan Avenue to the north, Glenwood Cemetery to the east, and Prospect Hill Cemetery to the south. Stronghold is landlocked by the cemetery, and the major street of North Capitol is causing many traffic problems. These concerns and suggestions were gathered from all of the residents using various sources for them to give us the inputs we can present to DDOT over a year ago. The biggest issue we have is it's dangerous to cross. Crossing on North Capitol by foot is incredibly dangerous on Evarts and Franklin. Since that time, they have made a crossing. We were trying to get a traffic light, but they have made that a crosswalk. Turning left on North Capitol is almost impossible, and it forces Stronghold residents to drive through alleys to Channing Street where they can come to a light at the exit. There have been residents and many accidents on North Capitol on Franklin Street going to the bus stop. My daughter was struck by a car on North Capitol Street, crossing on the corner, but it was not marked as a crosswalk, and so she was liable, and the driver tried to sue us for the damage to his windshield where she hit her head and her bumper where she had a severe break in her leg. So that was on North Capitol and Franklin, but that has been changed, I think, maybe in the last month or so. It's extremely dangerous to turn left, and the inside lane is a blind lane, and there have been many accidents where 2 lanes stop for the person to make a left, and a car comes in that last lane. The biggest complaint that we had on the intersection of Michigan Avenue and Franklin Street, the turning traffic going north on Michigan and turning right on Franklin does not slow down with the pedestrians crossing the street. It's a bus stop on the other side from Trinity. And the vehicles are turning at 35 miles an hour on the walk signal. We suggested that the turning signal for cars be delayed, given the pedestrians' opportunity to cross. This has not been resolved. I had a senior to tell me just this week that she had to have a police officer, to help her cross the street. We have cut through traffic. When traffic gets backed up on North Capitol Street, people come through the alley to avoid that traffic, and those cars are a lot of speeding cars, so that's extremely dangerous. And DDOT made the alleys that we use the alleys to get in and out because, as I said, we're landlocked. And they made one of the alleys one way with a do not enter sign, which has made it even worse for us because we had that traffic. And Uber and Lyft, on their GPS system that they have for their drivers, they direct their drivers to come through the alleys as well. So now our alleys are like street traffic sometimes. Yeah. So we asked DDOT if maybe they can contact Uber and Lyft to have them to revise that. High-speed speeding through both of the alleys and on the street, we were told that we could not get speed bumps, so we have no idea how we can do anything about the speeding. I already covered about the high volume, and we have congestion of traffic. It has gotten better with the First Street. When they had the First Street work, that's gotten better. At that time, we had the First Street traffic, and so the traffic was directed down on North Capitol, and it made it worse. We have, oh, I'm sorry, that quick. Okay, let me just move to the end, where at the end we asked for ongoing relationship between DDOT and the civic associations. And as I stated earlier, we started off having very positive communication with DDOT. Only with the turnover, I guess, that they have in there, that it just stops.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for your testimony. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember McDuffie, but I just want to say, with respect to one of the issues that you brought up, Ms. Jackson, and you've probably seen this around town, DDOT does have these, they're called LPIs, lead pedestrian intervals. When the light changes and you want to give the pedestrian a lead time to get out, they have that technology, and they could put that in at these lights, you know, to give you a head start so that, you know, you're not stranded on the corner as they whiz by you.
Right, that's what we requested,
right,
but it hasn't
right.
changed.
Okay. Councilmember McDuffie?
Thank you, Councilman Chair. I want to thank each of the witnesses for their testimony and for being here this evening. Commissioner, you mentioned, I think, that you had done a walkthrough with representatives from the mayor's office.
Yes,
Do you remember when you did that?
It was about 3 weeks ago with Mr. Lionel Gaines. He's here today. About 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yep.
And did they have the punch list of items that you just mentioned?
I'm sorry, sir?
Did they have the punch list of items that you just mentioned?
Yes,
I tried
sir.
to jot them down as you were
Yep.
saying them, but I couldn't keep up, so I wanted to make sure. So they already have them.
I made sure to streamline it, make sure mayor's office knows about it, your office knows about it as well.
Perfect. Okay, so they should be able to provide, I guess, us all with some updates in terms of where they are on those
Absolutely.
things. Okay. Mr. Lockett, you mentioned South Dakota Avenue, the 5100 block. I think in front of
back of UDC.
Is it the 5400 block, perhaps?
Is that 54?
I don't know, because I know that's one of the areas that we called in. It's on the list of items that we provided to DDOT some time ago.
2.5 years.
I know as well because my brother called me about that one because he ran into it. But that is on the list, and I will say I got some updates to, if you all were in, Councilmember Chair, you'll recall during the performance oversight hearing, in my questions to Mr. Dormjo, I mentioned the list of items that was about, I guess about 70 items that we had that hadn't gotten response. We have got a response. I haven't had an opportunity to go through all these things, but I know that that particular item was on the list that we provided to them. So hopefully it's been addressed. I don't know how when's the last time you've been in that area, but hopefully it's been addressed. Okay, all right. Well, I guess it hasn't been addressed yet.
And that's the information we talk. We don't get that type of information. Our community officials do not pass that on to us. We go to these meetings and they do not give us information. You can't even ask questions, and that's unfair.
Okay, all right. Well, let me turn as well. I'll note Ms. Smith, the 13th and Franklin issues that we covered earlier. Ms. Jackson, I know, and I think it was on the list as well, one of the things you didn't mention, perhaps it's on your more extensive list, and I know because I live in Stronghold where you represent, but the alley in the rear of the unit block of Franklin Street, I think is one of the things that I've been hearing about as well, and I believe may have been on our list earlier, in terms of having that repaved.
It has not been paved, and we have a lot of water accumulates there, and then in the summer with the mosquitoes and all of that. And the neighbor who lives directly behind that alley, they cannot park in their backyard because it's so deep.
Okay. All right. Again, I want to thank each of you if you want to follow up, I hate to not give you additional time. Here's the issue, though. Okay. We have 48 witnesses, right. and just by virtue of the fact that Catholic University has been gracious enough to allow us to host it here, but we have to leave at a certain time. Commissioner, I'm more than happy to follow up, and I'll have my staff here as long as you're here. We'll make sure we get it. So thank you all.
Thank you. And I'd like to now call, please, Bernadette Gouillon, if I'm saying that right, public witness. Is she here? Oh, please come forward. Patricia Williams, Commissioner Williams, ANC 5E02. Heidi Case, Project Action. Can I have some help there, please?
It's going to be 2 wheelchairs, so we're going to have to. Thank you, sir.
Thomas Mangrum, Project Action. Now, before we move on, I just want to clarify something. When we have folks from the same group, you know that? So, okay, one of you will have 5 minutes and one will have 3, and you can, duke it out between you, okay, how you want to do it. Okay, so I'd like to start with Ms. Grullon. Am I saying that right?
That's pretty close, Grullon.
Okay, well, that was close. In any event, you'll have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Sure, thank you. My name is Bernadette Grullon, and I live at 1314 Franklin Street. First, I just want to say thank you for allowing me and my neighbors to kind of express what life is like on Franklin Street. I moved into my home 6 years ago, and I absolutely love the neighborhood. I love my home. I love my neighbors are fantastic. I love the easy access to public transportation. So there are many reasons why it's a great place to live. Unfortunately, there is one primary fact that significantly affects living on Franklin Street in a negative way: the increasing truck traffic. When I first moved into my home, I quickly became aware of the large trucks driving along the streets as early as 4 a.m. and through 10 p.m. weekdays and slightly less on Saturdays. I would wake up when my bed would shake and the house would pop and creak as the trucks passed by. This hasn't stopped and it hasn't gone away, and it is something that I cannot change. I have asked contractors about potentially reinforcing my home or the structure of the house that would potentially reduce the vibrations, but there's nothing that can be done on that end. In May, the Director of Transportation sent a letter to Councilman Mr. McDuffie responding to concerns and issues raised by residents on Franklin Street, and I just wanted to touch on a few. There was a concern about traffic on Franklin being greater than Rhode Island Avenue. The response implied that this is not true because it states that the truck traffic, and I quote, on Rhode Island is closer to 3 times that of Franklin. And you know what? I actually agree with that. Why? Because Rhode Island is roughly 3 times as wide as Franklin Street. So the concern is valid. Proportionately, they both carry a similar level of traffic. The letter also addressed speed on Franklin, and it states that it's within the acceptable range of speed limit. I have no idea how any of that speed data was collected. There was no information about times or days of the week when this data was gathered. Since I've lived on Franklin, there has only been one speed device that is a camera on the eastbound direction of Franklin. There has never been any device on the westbound of Franklin, so I'm not sure how this response actually addressed the concern of speed traffic of trucks. There was also a request of truck restrictions on Franklin. The letter states that due to the functional classification of Franklin as an arterial minor road, truck restrictions are not allowed. While that may be what the policy says, I don't see any language that prohibits the limitation of truck sizes or weights from being implemented. This letter tells us that DDOT has not really heard our concerns and that Franklin is a residential street. It is a street with all homes. There are no businesses on Franklin Street. Why is the street being burdened with the traffic that does not even serve the immediate community? This letter tells us that moving trucks and the needs of the businesses that they serve is a top priority and a priority above the people who live on those streets. I pay taxes as well. These trucks are not just passing through. They nor their businesses they serve have to live with the negative impacts that they cause as they move through our streets. They're gone in seconds. Yet we have to live with the compounding effect of all of these trucks plus all sorts of other vehicles 24/7. My neighbors and I don't have the simple flexibility to just pick up and go elsewhere, nor can we change or modify our homes. Yet there's a flexibility of making adjustments to how trucks move through our streets, and that is possible. And I am requesting that you guys please exercise that flexibility and address our concerns that I believe are very reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Williams?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
On the panel. Rushing here, I forgot my speech, and I apologize for that.
That's okay. Could you pull the mic closer, though, because what you do have to say, we do want to have recorded.
Okay, again, I apologize. Rushing here, I forgot my speech on my desk. But I do want to address the issues with DDOT in my SMD, which is partially Franklin Street to Rhode Island Avenue from 4th Street to the railroad tracks over in Northeast. Franklin Street, we get the aftermath of all the trucks coming your way. It's a major nightmare at 7 a.m. in the mornings because trucks are trying to turn. Children are trying to cross the street, which makes it an impossible mission every morning. There was a study done back in 2014 and somehow they took away the crossing guard. So at this point, in 2017, these children are going by faith, crossing the street. DDOT informed me that I need to speak to my A&C commissioner. I got negative reports back. When I try to use the 311 system, they tell me to consult with my A&C commissioner. I am the A&C commissioner.
Have you consulted with yourself?
Yes, I did. I had breakfast, beautiful breakfast, coffee. We sat down.
I bet you're in complete agreement too with
Yes, we were. There were some negative points. We had to agree to disagree. But this is the comments that I'm getting back. I need to consult with my A&C. I got really sort of belligerent on one occasion. Yes, I did. And I asked them to look up the A&C for 5E02. And he got quiet. He said, "What is your name?" I said, "Love, you called me, you say my name." Then I got the reports, everything I needed, but still, things are being done from a 2014 survey. And times change. The community is changing. Developments are coming left and right. We need to work together. DDOT need to first stop telling me to consult with my A&C. That's me. That's all I want to say for the moment.
Well, even without your papers, I think you did a great job. So thank you. Ms. Case?
We've decided that I will take the 5 minutes.
Okay,
by the
then.
way. Thank you.
And you're in full agreement?
Yeah.
Good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chairperson Shea, Councilmember McDuffie, and Director Dorms, Joe, and staff. I'm Heidi Case. I'm a staff advisor to Project Action, an advocacy organization for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm a DC resident whose passion is accessible transportation, and I always vote. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you, and I had hoped Carol Tyson would speak before me and give you a little background. So on June 30th, a bunch of disability advocates closed Rhode Island Avenue at 2900 Newton Street for approximately an hour. At the address of 29 Newton Street is a large building that houses several different kinds of senior and people with disability. One part of it is housing for seniors and people with disabilities, several who are blind or have low vision. One third of the building is the center for seniors who are blind and have low vision, their day program. And on the other side of the housing is the Seabury Ward 5 Aging, the Aging DCOA Resource Center for your ward. So lots of people who need possibly higher quality of accessibility, and there is no way to cross the street there. There is no light, there is no stop sign, there isn't anything. And so it's very dangerous, particularly with those with low vision and blind. Getting across the street can be very dangerous. And I personally, I do not live there, but people with disabilities, I personally have been hit twice. Both times I had a green light, walk signal was in the crosswalk, and a Metro bus turned left at Brooklyn Station and hit me, and another time a car. So these are real issues, and I say that you pay for this one way or another. If cost is what's keeping DDOT from doing anything and putting the kind of noise signals, etc., that would allow people to safely cross, they can't get to the bus on the other side. So what happens is, then they use Metro Access, which costs, 10 times the cost of what a bus fare. So if you don't provide accessibility, then what happens with people with disabilities with limited options in their range of transportation, you end up spending more money. And an inaccessible bus stop is all it takes to qualify someone for Metro Access. So this is a wider, accessibility actually saves money, even though there may be upfront costs. And I just think it's very dangerous, and that needs to be looked at. They say they've tried to work on this for 10 years, and that it just makes sense that they find a way to be able to safely cross the street. Because the two of you are here and I have a little bit of time, another example of that same thing is the taxi transport DC program that you worked so hard with us. And the exact same thing that happened last summer is happening again. Director Shrapa immediately, without notice, without consulting people, made the decision because of funding to cut the service to employment and work only, exactly as he did last summer. You worked with us, we worked, we made strategies and plans of how we would do that different this year, and when it came down to it, none of it matters. And so now, and again, last year, when he cut that in July, and Dorms Joe, as a board member, would know this, Metro Access trip rate went up 10%. And Metro Access cost DC a whole lot more money. So you shifted those people off of Transport DC. They have to get somewhere. They have to use something. So they went back to Metro Access, which actually costs you more money, particularly with the new MOU that started last year. And so I will be reaching out to you, Mr. McDuffie, to further work on this problem. Thank you so much.
Mr. Mangrum?
Yes, I'm president, chairperson of Project Action. We got 2 chairpersons and 2 vice chairs because the demands for us to be different places, what have you, so we had to have 2 of each. Anyway, in my neighborhood, M Street, northeast over by Numa subway station, there's a construction site over there, but they didn't really think about the wheelchairs a lot of times because like the trucks be blocking the curves, the curves, what have you. And one time I went over there, it was like 5 trucks behind each other, just parked, and what have you over there. And like, so you got to be in the street. When you're in a chair, you don't have very much options of being able to cross the street sometimes because there's no curb cut or the curb cut is blocked or what have you. And I have noticed a lot of times, even the meter readers that be getting tickets on people's cars, they don't even respect the curb cuts. They will block the curb cuts in a heartbeat, yes, and then I have to go down the block to come right back around or what have you. And like the streets, the sidewalks is not hardly that accessible or what have you, because like the sidewalks going down from Florida Avenue to K Street, okay? A lot of them sidewalks is not really that accessible and stuff. Because like one side of the street, the sidewalk is wide at one end and then goes down and narrow another end. And there's a street light right there. But like the house on that corner of Arlene's place, the bricks for that land right there is coming out into the sidewalk. So either way, you can't use that sidewalk. I have to use the street. Luckily for me, they got bike lanes, so I use the bike lanes, or what have you. But still, it's kind of like a mess to be able to use. And then they want to have a lot of brick sidewalks, but they don't keep up with the brick sidewalks. And with the wheels, if they get caught between a hole in the sidewalk, it could tilt the truck over or what have you. So some of the sidewalks is not usable at all. I had to be in the street. A lot of times there's a caravan of cars behind me because there's a lot of one-way streets in my neighborhood over there by Gallaudet Cottage. So it'll be a caravan of cars and they'd be blowing a horn at me and what have you, but I can't use the sidewalk and what have you. I had to chew out somebody once before that was cussing me out for being in the street. And I had to let her know, get out of your car. I was pissed off that day. And
Say nothing further. I'm your lawyer. I give you, tell you.
I made sure that she seen the problem. And then when she looked, she said, well, I was just trying to help by cussing me out. Are you crazy? You know, so it gets like that.
Well, thank you. It's pretty obvious, we haven't gotten too far into it, but Franklin Street needs major attention. It seems pretty clear. And then, Ms. Case, you know, I thought I worked that out on the taxis.
I know you did.
And
I know you did.
frustrated to hear that it's a problem
The
again.
exact same problem.
So we'll see about that. And I know Councilmember McDuffie is going to make mention of the fact that he did get extra money, but nevertheless,
it's down to employment and work.
I'm just chagrined by that because we sat and worked it out.
I know. Please tell me I know.
In any case, Councilmember McDuffie.
I want to thank each of you for testifying, and I'm disappointed as well. Director Sharp, I think, is very innovative and smart, but when you limit the transportation options that are basically already limited down to just employment and work, you all are really left with very few ways to navigate the city. And so I've already alerted my staffer who works on these issues with the committee for us to follow up about it. We did add from our committee's budget an additional $200,000 specifically for that program, but it's still not going to be nearly enough to address the need that exists.
We were only $400 or $500 off monthly budget.
Okay.
But he took this drastic decision.
Yeah, he has money.
Right. So we'll follow up to see why he made that decision and see how it's going to impact that. I want to also point out, Commissioner, I know we chatted a couple of weeks ago. Have you gotten any updates on the issues that you just raised? And I know you have a longer list of issues that you probably haven't committed to memory, but are pretty extensive.
I haven't had a chance to talk to my ANC commissioner,
okay,
but I think about talking to her tomorrow morning, and I'll let you know.
After you had the opportunity to consult yourself, if you could follow up with us and let us know, we'd appreciate it.
No, I haven't received any further updates.
All right. Well, I regret that because I know this has been outstanding for a really long time, and there's some really serious issues. You mentioned the crossing guard that was there. I believe you're talking about the intersection of 7th and Franklin Street?
Yes.
Okay, well, you've got how many schools? 4
1, 2, 3,
in the vicinity?
3.
Well,
Three
if you throw in Noyes and then the charter school up on 8th Street,
then I think 4.
So I mean, it's a really serious issue. These are safety issues. Need to be addressed. You want to say something?
Yes, there has been a change. They've taken up the no parking signs.
Can you just pull the mic a little closer? Make sure we capture.
They have taken up the no parking signs, basically from in front of the school around that little curve to Franklin Street, and placed them on the hill going down Edgewood to curve into 8th Street.
Okay.
And they put the no parking signs there.
Well, you're not aware. I want to, and I'm not sure if there's anybody who DDOT might be able to speak to that, but I know they were working, I think the school and the business, their mess hall, and some others were having conversations about those signs.
Yes.
And whether or not they were necessary. Are you a part of that conversation?
I've gotten the tail end of it,
okay.
And they don't want those parking signs there, the no parking signs there. They're trying to get the signs for limited parking during school hours.
Okay.
But that's an issue, another issue as well.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you all raising those issues.
Please don't forget the blind and visually impaired and their need for crossing.
Absolutely. Have you all gotten, has the Project Action gotten a response from DDOT specific to the concerns you raised about the 29th and Newton?
No, we tweeted you, and I think DDOT also, but you responded for us to come here, and so we're here.
And we appreciate you being here.
And the next person is going to do even more detail. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you each.
Bye. One more thing. Is there a way that y'all can have a list of people that's in chairs that have to use the alleyway? Because I thank you for having the list of people so when there's snow on the ground, they can shovel my front. But I don't go out my front door. My front door is too close to the sidewalk. So I go in and out the back of my house. And so if the alley is not shovel, I can't leave the house. I have got stuck in my house for 2 weeks before because I couldn't go nowhere. You see, so
we'll work with I think you may be in Ward 6. We work with your council member as well as.
He's Ward 5.
I'm Ward 6.
Okay.
Oh, you are 6.
Yeah, she's 6. But we'll connect you with the mayor's office. They have an agency that I think works with residents in that respect, and we'll make sure that you get connected to DC Serve. Thank you, Ms. Steiner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carol Tyson, public witness. Christopher Boyes, public witness. Mr. Boyes. Robert Oliver, public witness. Mr. Oliver.
Right here.
Oh, there you are.
Yep.
All right.
Nice seeing you again.
Hi there. Betsy McDaniel, a public witness. Did you anticipate that? Oh, you have the list. Okay. Regina James, ANC Commissioner 5C05. Commissioner James. Good evening to you all. And Ms. Tyson, you're first, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. As Heidi said, I'm going to repeat some of the things she said, and I'm going to add to it. Hopefully, people will remember more if we keep saying it. So good evening, Chairperson Che, Councilmember McDuffie, Director Dorms, Joe, and distinguished staff. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. I am here as an advocate and district resident with a disability. I was recently made aware of a call for a traffic signal in Ward 5, just a few blocks from the Maryland border, by Ms. Heidi Case, who's already spoken, and Kim Bellamy. Ms. Bellamy is a blind, low vision advocate, DC Center for Independent Living volunteer, and National Federation of the Blind DC chapter board member. Ms. Bellamy and other advocates on this issue are attending the National Federation of the Blind National Conference this week and extend their apologies for missing this roundtable. They wanted to be here. As Heidi said, on June 30th, roughly 25 district residents with disabilities, some blind or low vision, many older adults, and their allies engaged in direct action to highlight the need for a traffic or pedestrian signal at the 2900 block of Rhode Island Avenue Northeast near Newton Street. Advocates risked their own safety by blocking all 6 lanes of traffic for an hour and a half. The group chanted, "What do we want? A traffic light. What do we want? Our civil rights." Some danced in preparation for the Chuck Brown Band concert later that evening. While the group made the most of its time in the street, the need for the signal, as has been said this evening, the need for a signal is very serious and must be addressed. Many of the advocates present that day are residents of the nearby, and I might be mispronouncing this, Heaton House, a 45-unit affordable housing community, and or consumers of the services provided at that same location at the Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired and a district aging and disability resource center. Currently, there is only a barely visible crosswalk on Rhode Island Avenue near Newton Street. Drivers travel fast and are unlikely to think of stopping for a pedestrian who enters the crosswalk to get to the 7-Eleven that's across the street or the bus stop that is also just across the street. The bus stop provides access to 5 major bus lines, 2 of them traveling between New Carlton Station and Rhode Island Avenue Station, others going north into College Park. So it's an important route. Many of the residents fear for their own safety and wait for assistance to cross. Walking to the nearest crosswalk with a traffic signal is often not an option. To get to the 7-Eleven would require walking more than a quarter of a mile. To the nearest bus stop going northeast, a long city block on a sometimes very narrow and often uneven and broken sidewalk. This distance in the uneven sidewalk is a barrier to access and can lead to increased isolation and decreased engagement in the community. I have been told that residents, advocates, and service providers have been raising the need for a traffic signal for nearly a decade, and that 2 DDOT representatives have inspected the intersection, but no action has been taken. Installing a traffic signal, or the more appropriate HAWK or high-intensity activated crosswalk signal at this intersection, would be in line with the district's adoption of Vision Zero principles, the district's Olmsted Community Integration Plan, the Age-Friendly DC Plan goals, and the DC Human Rights Act. I urge the council to support DDOT in taking measures, including meeting with interested stakeholders, sharing design measures that can be implemented quickly, installing audible pedestrian signals at the nearest traffic light if they are not present already, and I don't think they are, establishing a timeline for actions that can be taken, and reporting back on the progress made with the community in the next DDOT oversight hearing and to the DDOT Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Committee that is currently being formed. I am confident that given current DDOT staff, district priorities, and use of complete street design principles, the crosswalk can become a model for DC resident safe pedestrian access. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tyson. Mr. Oliver?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for having this meeting. I just want to say it's great to have the council members here and the illustrious staff.
Let me interrupt. Are you close enough to the...
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah. No.
Okay, good. I just want to say that I am here to report that much still needs to be done despite the recent strides made by the mayor and city council in terms of the city. I have seen more tree pruning, alley, sidewalk, and repairs done during the past 2 years than over the prior 10. The DC Office of Planning defines this area as part of the upper northeast element, an 8.7-mile area comprised of 20 neighborhoods. I'm here to report that despite the increased attention and development boom, the communities of Fort Totten, Michigan Park, and North Michigan Park still suffer from a backlog of unmet needs. These neighborhoods have experienced massive population growth as evidenced by these projects. Arch Place in Fort Totten, 929 residential units. Aventine in Fort Totten, 308 apartments. Emerson Park, 75 townhomes. Fort Totten Square 1, 350 apartments. Fort Totten Square 2, in the planning stage. Fort Totten Mews, 40 townhomes. EYA at 12th and Varnum, that project has 80 townhomes. Over the past decade, nearly 1,800 residents have been or will be added to our community. All are within a single square mile of the nearby Fort Totten Metro Station. Our city planners tout that DC is pedestrian friendly and walkable, but this is not uniformly true. I cite the Fort Totten Metro Station as an example. Despite the addition of 1,800 new residents, the Metro Station is nearly unapproachable from its eastern side. The station opened in 1978, but it still only supports pedestrian traffic from the west. On the east side, there is no sidewalk on the southern portion of Alloway Street northeast between South Dakota Avenue and 4th Street Northeast. Also, there is no paved path traversing the National Park Service land between Gallatin and Galloway Street Northeast. However, there are long-standing pedestrian trails which demonstrate the need for a real solution. This oversight is 40 years old. Like Moses, we have spent 40 years in the wilderness, but we have not lost faith. Although I'm thinking about the Quran seriously. At any rate, the reasons and responsibilities for this oversight have been lost in time. It no longer matters who's at fault. What matters is when something will be done. In conclusion, I reference Ms. Mary Hugh, a Washington Post reporter. She cites that DC is the second most walkable city in the United States in her June 16, 2016 article. So I ask each council member to ensure that all can participate in this supposed walkable city.
Thank you very much. Ms. McDaniel?
Good evening, council
Good evening.
members, staff, Director Jorms Joe. Thank you for holding this. My name is Betsy McDaniel. I live in Bloomingdale, and I would like to ask again for traffic calming in Bloomingdale. First Street is horrible. I think in March I spoke specifically about First and R, because I guess something had happened recently that set me off on that. But it's the whole street through Bloomingdale, the side streets. And if someone sneezes on North Capitol, much less a fire, a wreck, a criminal act, North Capitol shuts down and all of those vehicles turn east into Bloomingdale. Turn west, they're going south, and it's a nightmare. Friday afternoons, I don't know, I think everyone leaves the hospital center at the same time. It's bumper to bumper. There's so much southbound traffic. Cars drive down the wrong side of the road to get out of it. Something's got to it's getting worse and worse and worse. I remembered it was bad, but now that the First Street tunnel work is pretty much over and all the streets are open, it's really, really bad. It's dangerous. You know, I almost get run over at least once a week. You know, the cars don't even stop at the stop signs. I know I've told you before, but the Civic Association, the ANC, voted to support the traffic calming suggested in the Mid-City East small area plan. I want somebody to do something. And quickly, on a different topic, I'd like to talk about dumpsters. I think I've mentioned dumpsters before, but it's incredible that there's no control over how many dumpsters are within a given area, and the fees must be way too low, because right now there's a dumpster out in front of my house. I saw the contractor today. The work is finished. He just renewed his permit. The renewal fee must
You don't mean a dumpster for our trash. You mean one of those big things
the
for
roll-off,
construction.
the roll-off
Oh, okay.
dumpsters. So there's one roll-off dumpster. The project's finished. He told me he's finished today, and that dumpster is sitting there because it's so cheap to rent those. And they use it for the extra space for parking their construction vehicles. So I would like to see higher fees. I would like to see the hours not include nighttime, because they shouldn't be emptying those dumpsters at night. Why can't neighbors park there at night instead of having 24/7 hours on there? And to limit somehow how many are in a certain area. So I have a dumpster, there's a handicap parking reserved spot, and there's another dumpster. The woman who has to park between the two dumpsters has two walls in front of her. That is basically my whole block. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner James?
Good evening. My name is Regina James. I serve 5C05, the Brentwood community. Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilmember McDuffie, for holding this roundtable this evening. I know you put time in during the day, and I'm exhausted. This is not going to take long. This is real quick. My pet peeve is parking. I live in a residential community. I don't have any commercial. There's nothing commercial. I don't understand why I have commercial trucks on my street. I don't understand why I have all these out-of-town tags that are parking in my neighborhood. The residents are very upset and they're angry. I have people from Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. Now, one of my neighbor right next door to me, there was a car that sat on our street for about a good 4 or 5 months. The lady didn't move it because it broke down. So she didn't bother to get a tow truck. She just left it, and she lived in Virginia. People are tired of calling for parking enforcement. We shouldn't have to call for parking enforcement, especially for people that have residential parking permits. They should be out there enforcing parking. Now, I had to make a big to-do because my neighbor was just giving me a time of that car that was parked in front of his house. So I had to call all the directors, and DDOT finally came out, started taking pictures, and moved the car around the corner. The Virginia tag. Now, mind you, Maryland and Virginia is not going to give me that kind of courtesy if I leave my car in their state. Oh, it broke down, I'll just leave it here for 4 or 5 months. I try to come back and get my car, that car is going to be gone. The reality is, and I can't quite remember the gentleman's name, but they make these rules and regulations that allow them, the people that live outside of the District of Columbia, they allow them privileges to park in neighborhood communities. That's basically it, but I'm going to bring a recommendation. I wouldn't have DDOT or whoever's doing the parking have any rules, make up any rules or regulations unless it's first cleared by the ANC and the civic associations. Because people can get a waiver and stay on your street for I don't know how long. Who would have created this? It couldn't have been nobody from the district, because we have all of this development, and as we grow, parking becomes tight. And people get a little upset, especially, even though we don't have assigned spaces, if they can't get close to their house. So I would appreciate the parking situation, more enforcement. I know they go downtown and all that stuff, but if a person has a residential parking permit and they're paying for that permit, they deserve parking enforcement. And the other issue is not to have DDOT or whoever do rules and regulations for the District of Columbia, because, don't get upset, because majority of these people don't even live in this city. I think it's about 60 or 70% live outside of the District of Columbia. So if it comes to rules and regulations, it should be cleared by the ANC, especially if the ANC is the impacted area. And if it's just overall, then all of us need to look at it. Thank you, Madam Chair and Council Member.
Thank you very much. Again, I will defer to Councilmember McDuffie, but I do want to say about your situation. You have 2-hour residential parking? Well, I mean, it's very clear that that has to be enforced. I mean, that's why we have it, and DPW ought to be out there. I know you're making a note of that, Jeffrey, right? Okay. And then the other thing about these out-of-state plates, I'm not sure why they're not all over that, because I have people call me all the time, and they complain that they're too fast to go over somebody who's visiting from Virginia or Maryland, that, you know, those ROSA requirements and everything. So I don't think the problem here is the rules, but rather the enforcement of the rules. So what's your street address? What is it?
The 1300 block of Adams.
The 1300 block.
But it's the whole SMD.
That SMD, okay.
It's
all right.
the whole, I'm riding, and I shouldn't see cars with Pennsylvania tags. After a certain point, you should be made to have the District of Columbia tag.
And
now,
that's exactly right. You're exactly right. That's what the rules say.
Right. I understand the military, because I have people in the military.
And there are some exceptions. For example,
right.
You can get a special permit for some considerable amount. If you're a student, you can get a special permit if you're like an ambassador, and things of that nature. But these ordinary situations, these are a violation, no question.
That's it.
Okay. I'm sorry, Councilmember McDuffie.
No worries. I appreciate you all testifying and are well aware of some of the issues that you all raised. I know, Mr. Oliver, I similarly have real concerns about what's happening around Fort Totten Station and the lack of walkability around there. I know they put in the sidewalk, I believe, on the north side of the east entrance a few years ago at the community and my and others' request, but it didn't bother to do the south side. And we tried to pressure them to do the south side, but they didn't. We also tried to pressure them to put a fixed light along the trail that goes from Galloway to Gallatin, because we had experienced some assaults along the trail. In fact, I had our delegate, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, come out and do a walk with me and residents and ANC commissioners to highlight the issues, and we got some media attention, and finally we got NPS, the National Park Service, to do something about it, which was put up the temporary light. But it is like pulling teeth to get them to move in a way that responds to needs that exist in the community. But we're going to continue to work with Congressman Norton and others to try to get NPS to work on some of those issues. Commissioner, you know, I hear time and time again about the uneven, selective parking enforcement in parts of Ward 5. I've heard you mention it previously. I saw Commissioner Manning walk in. I know Gateway has that same issue, as well as Woods Ridge South. I've heard it from Ms. Penn, Mr. Davis, about the Metro workers with these out-of-state plates who are parking in the residential communities for longer than 2 hours, and there's no parking enforcement.
Yeah, but Council Member, mine's is strictly residential.
Right.
I'm not, it takes 5 or 10 minutes to walk to the subway.
Right.
It's told I shouldn't see anything but the District of Columbia tags, period.
But you do have some of the
Except
DPW.
for the veterans.
You do have like some of the
military.
business along W Street too, though, right? Where people are probably the business.
Well, yeah, but there's enough parking on W because that's zone manufacturing.
Right.
So they take up that part, but we do have issues with them coming into the community. And I need to get with them, at the businesses, because we have DPW there. But we also have I think it's a crane company there.
And I don't know if...
But they take up the parking, but when they get off work, they leave. But, and I'm glad you brought up this point, Council, maybe we need to install, meters, so we can get money from them. Maybe that would help us get the parking enforcement we need in our residential
I appreciate you
community.
raising that issue because there's certain areas in the ward where they installed meters, and I'm not sure who requested them. So in Ivy City, for example, I'm getting a lot of concerns raised from businesses and residents who live over there who say, okay, these meters are out here now, where do they come from, why are they here? On the other hand, perhaps it's something that they should be talking to you about to try to address the issues that you're experiencing in some of the other neighborhoods. I saw Commissioner Malone walking, I believe, and I know given the IC bus lots off of Queens Chapel Road and some of the other areas, we got a lot of folks who are parking in their community as well, and they've been experiencing similar issues. So we're gonna make sure that I shouldn't say we're going to make sure we raise them. We've been raising them, so we want to know how they're going to be solved, and that's why we're doing this tonight, is to hear from DDOT specifically, and to the extent it is a DPW parking enforcement issue, to hear from that agency as well as about how they're going to work with our ANC commissioners and our civic association leadership to address these issues. Mr. Oliver?
Oh, yeah, two quick issues.
Can you make sure your mic is there, Mr. Oliver?
Two quick issues. Both of the projects that I mentioned are supposed to receive funding in fiscal year 2018. Now, because of the political uncertainty, does DC have a backup plan that should this funding fall through, that we have another way to provide funding? Also, a few years ago, DDOT started a major traffic secularization plan. They've gotten most of the city done, but I've yet to hear anything about Ward 5. Could you also find out about that? Thank you.
Yes, we can find out about that as well. I want to thank this panel. I don't know if you have any additional questions, Madam Chair, but I want to thank you all. And I got to tell you, Betsy, really the idea that there would be two dumpsters in one block,
A short block.
to me makes zero sense, and I'm not sure why that would happen, but it is something that we'll raise and try to figure out whether or not they even know when they sign off on these things the impact that they're having on the quality of life of residents who actually live in these neighborhoods.
And it's been worse. I thought it was getting better. I don't think I mentioned it in March. I thought it was getting better, but there have been 3 on the longer blocks, and then 1 around the corner. It's someday maybe all the houses will be flipped and it'll stop, but it's just real quick. It's a safety issue too, because I hate to use the word parking because people roll their eyes, but when people can't find a place to park, that means they're driving around the block, and then they cut through the alley, and then traffic backs up when you have to park. So it impacts parking in a safety issue too.
Right. Well, we appreciate you all raising it. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now call, please, Brian Stevens, a public witness. Is Brian Stevens here? Mr. Stevens? Caroline Petty, public witness. Kyle Todd, which I have listed next to Kyle Todd's name, Rhode Island Avenue, Main Street. I don't know if that's an organization, but is Kyle Todd here? Okay. Greg Caston, Pro Fish. And Kevin Malone, Commissioner Malone, ANC 5C02. Mr. Malone, again, I start on my left, you're right, so you're going to be first. And I see, and Councilmember McDuffie has already made reference to this, that we only have this room for a certain period of time. So if you can think of a way to abbreviate your testimony to the 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. So, Commissioner, we're going to start with you.
Good evening. Thank
Good
you,
evening.
Chairperson Che and Councilmember McDuffie for holding this hearing. So I'm going to start with a question because I know some of your panelists have probably already asked this in terms of residential parking. But I'd like to know when the council plans to take up the measure where DDOT has promulgated residential parking to include the red and white signs versus the green and white signs. Red and white signs are restricted to residential parking only at all times of the day. And under DDOT's new policy, they only issue green and white signs which allow individuals to park in a residentially zoned parking for 2 hours where they then can be ticketed. After a year in that program, which is the pilot phase, the residents have to submit another petition where they can ask for extended hours. But what I'm here today is to speak on oversized trucks traversing through the neighborhoods to get to their routes and their final destinations. For the last 2 years, in 2015, former Chief of Staff for Councilmember McDuffie, Janet Mobley, requested DDOT to do an emergency traffic study in my neighborhood. And it has taken 2 years now for DDOT to finally respond. I finally received an official letter in May of 2017 where DDOT has had a number of internal discussions. They've had private meetings with what they claim to be area businesses within the Langdon Park community and did not invite the community or the ANCs, and would subsequently issue an official notice that suggested that oversized trucks, despite the signage and prohibitions in the neighborhood, have the right to traverse through the neighborhood to reach to their final destinations. We've worked for 2 years to get MPD to install automated truck traffic ticketing systems, and I've tried to communicate to DDOT that in their process for the truck traffic study, they have a process where they can do what's called vertical and horizontal traffic calming alignment. And even with what DDOT has suggested, there was absolutely no compromise. And I have to tell you, and I'll wrap this up because my testimony is quite long, I think one of the issues clearly with DDOT is their leadership. And the other issue with DDOT is also the attrition rate. I have worked with 7 people at DDOT, 5 of which are no longer at the agency. And so when you go through that, you have to start the conversation back from square one. If a person leaves, there's no continuity. And I think it's really discouraging that now 7 people that I've had to work with, and 2 years now, and we are no closer to a solution. The only solution that we have is 18-wheelers and construction dump trucks traversing through neighborhood streets where they don't have the turning radius. They are damaging the new sidewalks that were recently installed, damaging curb cuts, and I think it's unfathomable for DDOT to suggest there have been no accidents, no one's gotten hit yet, and so therefore we don't need to come up with a solution. And just to wrap this up, if you're entering Queens Chapel Road from Bladensburg, Queens Chapel turns into 20th Street. And 20th is the street where the Langdon Park Recreation Center is located. Langdon Park spans 3 blocks from 18th Street all the way to Mills Avenue, where 18-wheelers and dump trucks often travel. I don't want to be around when one of those trucks hits a kid that, for whatever reason, doesn't look both ways, but just is running through to get to the other side of the park. And this happens all too often. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Petty?
Yes, thank you. My name is Caroline Petty, and first I want to thank you, council members, for coming out, and staff and Director Dormsjo for coming out here tonight. It goes without saying that we've all been talking about traffic as a huge regional problem. It's a huge issue for the metropolitan area, and indeed we're one of the worst places for traffic in the country and even the world, some studies have suggested. And so that goes without saying, but even in Brookland, as we've heard tonight, we're becoming more and more crowded with both truck traffic and vehicular traffic, cars. And so I wanted to just offer, based on my own experience here in Brookland, I want to offer a couple of suggestions for you to consider as possible, maybe longer term solutions or mitigations to the problem. And while they're specific to Brookland, I think that they may have citywide applicability as well. But so I kind of had three areas, and the first of the areas is there's been a lot of discussion about development in Ward 5, and indeed we're experiencing an incredible boom, unlike anything we've seen basically since most people have ever lived here. And given that most of the projects are not even online, they haven't even started delivering people to our streets, but they will. And given that that's going to happen, I think that it would behoove us to get a better understanding of the traffic impacts of those large new developments that are coming down the pipe, that are in the pipeline. And if possible, attempt to mitigate them now. Right now, when we do traffic analyses that are associated with PUDs or other development approvals, those analyses are generally focused very site-specific on the specific project at issue. And what I would suggest, though they don't typically take into account the impact of the new project in totality with other projects that are in the, within a reasonable certain radius of that new project. And I think that ought to change. We ought to consider something like, both of you are probably familiar with the Clean Air Act Transportation Conformity Program, where before transportation projects, new roads, before they can be built, you have to do an analysis of the impacts of that program on air quality. And if you find mitigations, you have to mitigate. So something like that might be worth considering, but not for air quality, but for traffic in this case. Second thing that I want to mention really quickly, and then I'll wrap up, is that we ought to look to the comprehensive plan. We're in the middle of a comprehensive plan review, and there are a lot of good things in the comp plan to address vehicular traffic and heavy truck traffic. The problem is they're not being implemented, and that ought to change. And then lastly, there's a whole suite of really good things that are being done to provide district residents with alternatives to cars, alternative modes of transportation that'll help take some of the or the traffic off our streets. And I'm thinking of obviously public transit, the metro, encouraging residential development around our metro stations, improving the bus service, and continuing to work to improve the walkability and bikeability of our city.
Thank you very much. Mr. Todd?
Good evening. Thank you,
Good evening.
Committee Chair Che and Councilmember McDuffie, and thank you, Director Dormshow, for joining us tonight. And I want to start off by thanking the entire DDOT staff for their work through the years on really being a critical portion of DC's growth. It's a big job, and I think overall everything's gone quite well. But the topic for tonight is communication, and I represent the businesses along the Rhode Island Avenue Northeast Main Street corridor. I'm also a resident on Monroe Street, so my plaster in my house and I also agree with the truck traffic, but I'm here to talk about the businesses. We have a Rhode Island Avenue Northeast Streetscape Improvement Project that we are waiting on. It has been an ongoing project for the last 3 years, and one of our greatest frustrations is the utter lack of communication around it. We too have experienced turnover in the folks that we've dealt with. In February, we finally had another public design meeting. It was open to the public, and this was a much needed, long awaited meeting. Even though we've been working with the council member's office, Councilmember McDuffie's office, from the very beginning about this, the only way we found out about it, the only way I found out about it, was that there was a door hanger on a business door next door to my office, and the business owner said, "Hey, what's this?" And that's the only way I found out about it. When I called the DDOT reps, they came out and started telling me about the project as though I had never heard of it, and that was incredibly frustrating. We had a very engaged meeting because we immediately got it out on social media, and so we had a huge turnout from area residents, lots of feedback given to the DDOT reps there, and since they left that afternoon, we've heard crickets from them, which is, again, frustrating. I will say that I've almost given up on trying to track down answers. I figure that they'll just put another door hanger on our door when it's time to talk about it some more. And from business owners' perspectives, when our business owners are applying for public space permits for, say, outdoor seating, some of the communication frustrations that they're facing are going through that permit process. Whoever's reviewing it will run across one problem with the outdoor seating and then stop and send it back to the business owner, who then has to get that issue fixed and then sign up for another hearing, only to go back and have a second thing pointed out. So they end up wasting up to 6 months going through the public seating permit process when just a review of their application could have addressed any problems in totality at the very beginning. So little things like that. I do want to revisit my acknowledgement of all the hard work of the individuals of DDOT, but I think this is this communication issue is systemic and ongoing, and I hope that maybe tonight we'll be able to address some of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caston.
Yeah, how you turn that?
Up, your time's up.
I'm sure. I don't know how to turn that on, but I know my voice booms. I'll be very quick. A couple things. I have 25 trucks in the city. I would encourage every single person here who has an issue with a truck to take a picture of it and send it to the ownership of the company. You'll find more often than not the company does not endorse or support what the individual driver is out there doing. And to that end, I thought my testimony might be more about potential ways to help. I'm actually here because in Ivy City, I'll do my problem first and then quick potential ways to help. In Ivy City, meters appeared in the last 3 months. And I have 200 employees who used to park throughout and on the street and now have nowhere to park or fewer spaces to park because it's $2 an hour to park in the meter. And I think that there could have been some community involvement, in particular that that's an industrial zone or a converging industrial zone where perhaps it could have been 4-hour parking or less expensive parking as there are in other places around the city. That would be one thing. So communication is one. Two, part of the issue my workers have is that they're in competition with construction workers. There's an awful lot of construction going on there, and I think council could maybe find a way to force construction sites to put into their budgets having parking for their employees, and I brought a whole bunch of pictures of the construction workers have a tendency to be the first guys in the city and will generally take every single parking space they absolutely can, and then they're there until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and that really they become competition, and they might be there for 5 or 6 or 7 months at a time, depending on the construction. In the case of the Pappas building, I'd say 3 years, but that's a different issue. And then I think that there could be a better database of repeat offenders, and so that you could maybe escalate some of the fines, including trucks, including my drivers if they do it, and type stuff. So I'm not sure that DDOT has that type of database, but I think that's something that council could maybe look at for funding. Construction workers, communication, upcoming business, and That was really all my points that I was going to make. Everything else that I talked about is here tonight. For me, it was really just the parking came out of nowhere, and 140 employees of ProFish, 90 or 85 of which are DC residents who don't always come from the other city. Ivy City's not perfect in terms of public transportation. There are some issues with that, so I think council would be wise to address that. And
Thank
I
you
got
very
15
much,
seconds.
Mr. Caston, and thank you all very much for coming to testify. Councilmember McDuffie?
Thank you to each of you for testifying. Mr. Todd, in terms of the streetscape, or more specifically, the lighting issues around the main street, what's the status of those? I think that might be one of the items that was included in the list that we received a little earlier today. Again, I haven't had a chance to review it, but are any of those issues still outstanding?
Yes. And I didn't even feel like I had time to get into the lighting issue tonight, but yeah, we had a light up RIA event a couple of dark winters ago, pointing out how little the streetlights were impacting the sidewalk coverage. DDOT did come out and put some pedestrian sidearms for LED lamps on maybe every third utility pole, still leaving a lot of dark spots. Their original plan was by last August to have those pedestrian arms on every utility pole, and now in mid-July
So we'll ask for a status update of that, and perhaps we already have one. We'll make sure that DDOT gets it to you as well, so you can communicate it to the businesses along the main street. And we'll obviously, I think, look at the RPP versus the ERPP issues as well, Commissioner Malone. And I wanted to mention really quickly, if I could, to Ms. Petty, your suggestion about looking at how traffic impacts future developments is actually included in a bill that I already introduced, actually, called the Proper Planning for Future Growth Amendment Act of 2017. And I encourage you to take a look at it. We'll make sure that we forward you a copy of it. I think it incorporates some of the things that you just mentioned, and also describes, without me getting into too much detail in the interest of time, but you should check it out, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that. I appreciate some of the suggestions you made, Mr. Caston. We appreciate all the great work you're doing over there in Ivy City with ProFish and with the smokehouse and the market and everything else. So thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to call, please, Deborah Kushner, a public witness, and Stephen Kushner, a public witness. Is Deborah Kushner here? Oh, good. Okay, fine. So you're Stephen Kushner, and you're going to carry the family testimony. Sharon Turner, public witness. Stanley Jackson, the Vice President of Tenants Association. Stanley Jackson. Mr. Jackson. Is he coming? We're so friendly. You should come. Okay, so we do have Mr. Jackson. Ralph, is it Buxell, a public witness? Buxell? Good. Mr. Jackson, you have sat in the hot seat. You go first. 3 minutes, okay? Anyway.
Okay.
Alton, you're up.
I reside right there, 2900 Rhode Island Avenue, 2900 Newton Street Northeast, right between Seabury and the Blind Center. And just as the two ladies previously before me, I'm echoing what they said, trying to get across that street is very hard to do. And as people with disabilities, we find it very hard to get across there, and the people with they are blind, trying to get across that street is even more hard for them, because trying to go across the street and stay in the crosswalk is very hard, because the city didn't make it accessible for them. As you know how you go down a ramp, you have the little things for them to touch on. There's nothing on the other side for wheelchairs to go up on or the blind people to have their sticks lead them, let them know that the edge is there. So if you step out of the crosswalk and you get hit, God forbid, you're wrong. But the city hasn't made it no provisions for them to stay within the crosswalk or no lights and anything there to keep traffic from speeding through and not acknowledging those people. So to travel a whole city block out your way to get back in the way to get to a bus stop, that's not right.
No, it's certainly not right. You know what? And when the other witnesses have described the people who are right there and have to get across that street, it strikes me as almost bizarre that they would neglect this particular area to help people who are disabled or blind. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, but see, we're on the 30th. We staged a little protest there, and just so people can get to see what we see. And the lieutenants and the sergeants of your Metropolitan Police Department, they understand. The city has neglected us. Metro neglected us. They took away our bus stops there, and just by the attorneys, they brought them back. Now, we're looking for a light or something there to keep us able to cross that street. They blocked the crosswalk at all times with abandoned cars, as they removed cars from the crosswalk while we was doing our protest, because we couldn't get on the other side of the street. So I just asked the panel, if y'all would come out, just come out, see what we see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kushner?
Yep. I live in the 1300 block of Franklin Street Northeast.
I've heard of that.
I've lived in my house for 30 years. I just hope that you've heard our concerns. I'm not going to repeat them all. I'm just hoping that everybody here has heard our concerns. Okay? And then I just want to thank my neighbors for all their time and their effort to come out. And I think I want to thank everybody else that's in the audience for taking the time and the effort to come out. Okay?
Thank you. Ms. Turner?
Committee Chair Che, Councilman McDuffie, Director, and staff. Let me first thank you for coming to the community to hear our concerns. My issue is not traffic. It's not parking, it's not disability. But what I'm going to talk about very briefly is what many of us go through on a daily basis, dealing with parts of DDOT. For nearly 2 years, since August 31st, 2015, I've been trying to have the apron of my driveway repaired. Speaking with Barry on that day, which was my first call, I was given a case number and told to call back in 30 days to see what the investigator found out. Upon calling back October 15th, Gina told me the apron had been inspected and approved for 2016, sometime during the summer. In July 2016, I spoke with Aisha, who gave me a work order and told me this type of work came under streets and bridges, and she would pass it on. I made 2 additional calls in 2016, 1 in August, 2 in November. Of course, in November, it's too cold to do this type of work. This year, 2017, I began calling in February. In April and June, I wrote the councilman's office trying to get assistance, still nothing. The apron was basically torn up by city snowplows, and it gets worse with each succeeding year. I just want it repaired. That's it.
Mr. Buxell?
Hi. I've lived on Taylor Street for the last 20 years, on 1000 block. And in that time, I've worked with DDOT on a number of projects. And most importantly, I was successful in helping to get my street and the street between 12th Street to the bridge on Taylor Street paved, because I hired an engineer to document the damage being done to my house by the heavy trucks that were going up the street. So I don't have that problem anymore. But all the streets around me, 12th Street and Michigan Avenue, Taylor Street from South Dakota Avenue to 12th Street has not been heavied up. And I realize part of the problem is we're an old city. We had businesses scattered throughout the city that needed to have deliveries to them. And the trucks now have gotten much larger than they were. 18-wheelers go by my house every day throughout the day from 5 in the morning on. But there are ways, most people don't realize that the city streets have Class A and Class B highways, that the trucks can be rerouted on to get to most locations and businesses in the neighborhood. And that should include the District of Columbia buses and trucks. The DC, they go to the trash center up at Fort Totten, and instead of taking, like going off, they come up 4th Street and then come down 13th Street and 12th Street, instead of going down McCormick Drive right behind us to get to the transfer station where DC has a gas station. And so that presents a major problem. And then the other problem is the city zoning board is authorizing businesses such as by the Taylor Street Bridge for storage facilities, and they've done it by the Metropolitan Branch Trail. They don't bother to check with DDOT to find out if the streets can carry that heavy traffic that are going to them. And there needs to be coordination with the zoning board and the other district governments with DDOT, because we blame you guys for the problem. And the problem's not that. The problem is they're building structures that aren't done. And just like Jamal here with the, what is it? The parking garage that's over here. I was giving him grief all the time because I was taking pictures, and then I had to, for this past year, I had to take some of my great nephews and nieces to school in Clinton, and I would leave at 5 and get back at 11 from that. But when I would be out there, they would know when I would come, and they would stop driving those heavy trucks filled with debris when they know they're supposed to go out down Michigan Avenue, and there ought to be a penalty for those people. And I think that the District of Columbia government could do a few things that would help. But in addition, part of the problem that we're having in our neighborhood is the heavy commuter traffic that's here. And they're coming down our alleys, they're driving down one-way streets the wrong directions, including the trucks. And we just authorized a 600-unit building school, meaning at least 300 new traffic vehicles are coming to the neighborhood, and we're overwhelmed, and there are a number of accidents that are happening, and we're going to be beginning to document. In addition, we have businesses in the neighborhood that have been here for years, and they were talking about the parking issue, the residential parking, non-residential. Well, we have a greater problem. We've got businesses that we're taxing that we want to have money for them. We want them to succeed. But people from my father's neighborhood over in Woodridge, in the sections that have Zone 5 parking, are parking up by the metro station. They're parking on O's Street. And they're parking in all the areas here. And the business has approached us, the Michigan Park Citizens Association, asking us for assistance to get DDOT to perhaps restrict parking to 2 hours for everyone, except if you're a resident in that area, so businesses can thrive, because the businesses are complaining to us they don't have adequate parking. And
Mr. Buxell, I really have to ask you to sum up here.
Well, that's enough.
Okay, that was a good summary.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you all very much. We don't have any questions for this panel. Thank you. I'd like to call, please, Lauren Kitts, a public witness. Lauren coming, okay. Kevin Reefsteck, a public witness. Anwar Salim, H Street, Main Street. And Sarah Shank, a public witness.
Is Ms. Shank here? Oh. How about LaRoya Huff? Leroya Huff. I think Barbara Lee and Clarence Lee are no longer here. Christine Thompson. Christine Thompson? Okay, great. Take your time. Good evening to each of you, and thank you for being here and taking the time to provide testimony. We're going to begin. I'm a little different from Ms. Che. I'm going to begin from my right and your left with Ms. Thompson. You can pull the mic closer to you, and you can begin with the testimony. You're going to have 3 minutes to testify. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to talk about the parking space and people who have business in the homes, and then the people come in taking the parking space. Plus, I try to get a handicap parking ticket plaque. And what happened, the note went to the next door neighbor. They'll send it back. They'll call me and say I could park in the alleyway. But the people who have the business is the ones, the people, their customers is parking in the space. I might have to run and pick up my medicine or go to the doctor in the morning and I come back. I had to park by the church or down the street, and I think that's not fair for me to have to walk farther down. So sometime I would go ahead and catch the bus just to go to CVS. You know, and that's kind of necessary for me to just to go ahead and use my car. I'm complaining about that parking with rented people who have a business in the neighborhood, in the house. That's the part about it. I know in Maryland and Virginia, when people had more in one car, they had to pay more tax to have more cars. Then we got neighbors around the corner who have 2 cars, a big backyard to park the car in. They'll park it there and leave it. And I think that's unfair. So I just want to know what we're going to do about that.
Okay, go ahead, you can finish, you still have time.
And the next thing, McDuffie, you always know what I want about school. So that is it.
Well, I appreciate you coming down, Ms. Thompson, to let us know, even the things that I already know, for reiterating those things and putting on the record. But if you could, just so the record is clear, mention the neighborhood you live in, the street you're referring to.
Right. I just wanted to be like the rest of the guys in here.
No, you are. But if you could let us know what street you live on. What street you live on?
Oh, on 16th Street.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the cross section where you are?
Monroe.
16th Monroe. We appreciate it. That is one of the areas, particularly 17th as well. 17th in Monroe and 17th in Lawrence, where we have already reached out to DDOT because of the traffic accidents that occur in both of those intersections.
So we did have so many accidents, so we had a big tree in the back.
Mm-hmm.
After the earthquake, I could always hear those trucks coming down, rolling, and then the tree fell.
Yeah.
It was more blessing that the tree did not hit the
they hit 14th and then they on a decline and they come rolling down your street.
Right.
And so we appreciate you being here to put those concerns on the record. Mr. Salim?
Okay, good evening, Chairwoman Che and Councilman McDuffie. My name is Anwar Salim, the Executive Director of H3 Main Street, a nonprofit organization and a resident of the District of Columbia, who is focused on the revitalization efforts of the H Street Northeast, Bladenberg Road, and Benning Road neighborhood commercial quarters. H Street Main Street Road is to provide technical ground level door-to-door support to the district government by facilitating working relationships and partnerships with property owners, business owners, and developers, providing technical assistance promoting the quarters, attracting new development and businesses, providing business retention services, advocating on behalf of investors, and creating value for the quarters that ultimately benefit the city as a whole. H3 Main Street enjoy our working relationship with the District Department of Transportation. However, we believe that DDOT should work with the Main Street organizations and programs when it comes to waiving or reducing permit fees and the use of public space for events and festivals. Our work and goals are similar to those of a business improvement district. Both organizations are working to support business growth and retention, promote our areas, clean streets, and attract customers and tourists to our areas, and synergistically working to boost the economy of the city. We believe events like neighborhood festivals, Art All Night, and similar bring a strong presence to our neighborhoods and help support business growth. The city has traditionally focused on downtowns to attract tourism and to strengthen the economy. However, our Main Street districts have stories to show and stories to show and tell of a city that is not just made up of federal buildings in its history, but one that is made up of unique neighborhoods. These neighborhoods have history the tourists and the world should know and discover. Last year, DDOT partnered with 8th Street Main Street for Art All Night as we provided poetry, spoken word, and music, and other forms of entertainment on the DC streetcar. The DC City Council members, city officials, and other local riders watch and rode with an amazed look on their faces as new riders pack the DC streetcar and enjoy the festivities. This is one of the best promotional marketing tools for DDOT and the DC streetcar in 2016 and should be repeated again in 2017. As a partner, DDOT could assist us in making our task a lot easier. In 2016, 20% of 8th Street Festival attendees came from our immediate neighborhoods, 45% came from other parts of DC, 17% from Maryland, and 14% from Virginia, and 6% outside of the metropolitan area, and spent over $61 per person. The city benefited for over $740,600 in new tax dollars and fees from the festival. Fees from DDOT for this event should be waived. During the 2016 festival, we paid $110,000 in permit and fees related to the event. In 2016, we received a bill from DDOT in the amount of $12,230, $30.85. 8th Street Main Street paid $2,970 for base fees, and $9,260 was waived for meter fees. We are asking that DDOT waive the meter fees for the 2017 8th Street Festival. If neighborhoods are going to compete and have a fair chance, this council should take a closer look at passing public space legislation B22-236. This bill needs to level the playing field with appropriate modifications if needed. I think you're very familiar with that bill.
I am, Mr. Slim. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have a lot of other folks who have to testify, and we want to make sure we have an opportunity to have the director also testify. I know you're good about providing written testimony, and what you provided was going to be incorporated into the record.
Okay.
Ms. Kitts?
Hello, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I live on the 1200 block of Orange Street in Trinidad in Ward 5. I want to talk about some issues related to some of the pollution concerns that have come up tonight. So according to DC Health Matters, Ward 5 has one of the highest asthma rates in DC, and DC overall has a higher adult asthma rate than the US average. As a Ward 5 resident, I'm concerned about air pollution and negative health impacts for myself, for my community, and as a human being, I'm equally concerned about the impacts of climate change. For this reason, I urge you, Councilmember McDuffie, to support a carbon fee for DC. So a carbon fee would do the following. 1, maximize the pace and degree of DC's reduction in carbon emissions. A carbon fee has the power to provide DC with a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. This will keep us on track with both Mayor Bowser's clean energy goals and with the Paris Agreement. 2, it would show true leadership among the cities and states taking action on climate change. DC can provide a model for other jurisdictions to take control of a clean energy future. This is important in face of the Trump administration's negligent approach to the most pressing issue of our time. 3, a carbon fee would charge an upstream tax on carbon emissions, generating millions of dollars, which would be rebated directly back to DC residents. It could be used for green infrastructure projects, and credits would go to local businesses. By using a progressive structure, the greatest percentage of the rebate would go to DC's low-income residents. So thank you for the opportunity to testify and for your hard work and for your time for a just and livable future in DC. And I do hope we will have the chance to have a separate hearing about the carbon fee itself as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Thank you very much for holding this hearing this evening and for your work on the council. I'll be brief with my statement. I live on the 100 block of V Street Northeast. I'm here representing myself, but also my neighbors who have also complained about our alley that runs behind our houses. That alley the surface is a mix of both brick and concrete. The brick on that alley is settling at a faster rate than the concrete, which is causing the alley to become uneven, and in one spot, a large pothole, which when driven over in the wrong way has actually caused several residents and visitors to scrape the bottom of their cars and cause damage to their cars. I did submit a request via 311 last summer. The number is in the record. Never had any repairs or had any follow-up on that request. This summer, my neighbors and myself submitted several requests, around 8 requests this summer about the same issue. One of the requests was closed in a couple weeks with the comment that they could not find the pothole, despite the fact that I had included a picture in the 311 request. The rest of the requests have not been answered to my knowledge. As a quick fix, we'd like DDOT to just come out and do some sort of resurfacing over that pothole to prevent any damage to vehicles. In the long run, we would ask that DDOT resurface our alley, potentially as a part of the future Alley Palooza.
Okay, and I think the 100 block of V Street Northeast, you all use the alley probably more frequently than a lot of folks because of the street being one way, I imagine, no?
Yeah, that's correct. And also that portion of the alley serves both the 100 block of V Street, but also a portion of Rhode Island. And so people don't really like parking on Rhode Island because of all the traffic. So there's a lot of use of that back there.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you each for your testimony here this evening.
Thank you.
Is Carlos Davis is still here. Tim Thomas, I do not see. Is Tim Thomas here? Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up, Thomas. Charlotte Lewis and William Lewis. Ms. Lewis, I take it you aren't testifying? Yes. Okay. All right. How about Pablo Melgarejo?
Thank you.
I want to thank each of you for being here this evening and being patient. I know you've been a long evening for a lot of us, so thank you for your patience. I'm going to start again from my right and your left with Mr. Thomas.
What? Let the president speak first, please.
If you like, that's fine.
All right. Good evening, Councilmember McDuffie, and acknowledging Chairman Che. We appreciate the opportunity. I'm Charlotte Blount Lewis, president of the Queens Chapel Civic Association, and I'm accompanied tonight by William Lewis and Timothy Thomas. We're very appreciative of the support that we've received this year, particularly from your office, council member, and from the mayor's office with respect to the needs that DDOT has serviced or provided to the community. In particular, DDOT staff person Talisia Delberry has responded to us day and night, literally, to needs such as tree trimming, sidewalk and curb installation and repairs, alley reconstruction and road repair. However, the community still has several unmet needs that in some cases have gone unresponded to for nearly 2 years. We did a walkthrough of the community a year ago, October 4th of 2016 exactly, and that was orchestrated by Keem Rogers and Lionel Gaines of the mayor's office. And on that team was a DDOT representative. We walked the entire 11 blocks of the community, noted a lot of concerns, and the concerns that I'm going to talk about tonight are concerns that are still unmet. In the 1700 block of Allison Street, residents have endured crater-sized holes in the street that DDOT has simply responded to by covering with metal grates, and nothing more has been done. The entire street and sidewalk are filled with significant dips and curves to the point that residents they actually fear that their cars that are parked on the street will be lost or damaged in a sinkhole with the next heavy rainfall. In the 1700 block of Webster Street, the 1600 block of Varnum Place, and the 4800 block of 16th Street, we, like other residents in the city, are suffering from heavy commercial traffic, dump trucks and construction traffic up and down that street. There are no signs to stop this flow of traffic coming in from Michigan Avenue as a cut through, or coming in from South Dakota Avenue. And actually they should be going around Michigan Avenue onto South Dakota rather than cutting through these residential streets. Homeowners have complained of shaking of houses. Pedestrians and residents are in fear getting in and out of their cars and simply walking. Some residents have actually waved these fast-moving trucks to stop. And taken tag numbers, tried to talk to the drivers, and ironically, the drivers respond to them in Spanish as if they don't understand what is being said to them. We recently, with the help of Lionel Gaines, submitted a traffic calming review that was mailed in on July 5th, and the neighbors are waiting to see just what happens, what kind of response they get. In the 1900 block of Michigan Avenue, 1800 block of Michigan Avenue, and the 1700 block of Michigan Avenue at South Dakota Avenue, which intersects with the 4300 block of South Dakota. Pedestrian sidewalks, crosswalks, and signs are badly needed. Now, to DDOT's credit, they have been out over the last 4 months and put down strips, but the contractor work has been pretty shoddy. Because the strips just aren't there, or they've deteriorated. This is a heavily used main thoroughfare, and it certainly needs more attention for pedestrian safety. I think Mr. Thomas might have a few things to add to the Michigan Avenue situation. I'm not sure.
Yes. Good afternoon, Councilman. It's always good seeing you.
Ms. Thomas, if you could just slide the mic a little closer.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay. In reference to the 1700 block, 1800 block, 1900 block of Michigan Avenue, about 12 years ago, that whole strip was repaved with a new street, new sidewalk, and new curb. As of today, it's in much need repair, wear and tear from the traffic coming from the state of Maryland, and also in the neighboring areas here with the Hospital for Sick Children, VA Hospital, Washington Hospital Center, and so in Providence Hospital. That area there, we have 1700 block of Michigan Avenue is very well used in the morning for traffic. We have a very difficult time for our residents at the corner of Michigan and Webster Street trying to catch the subway. It's virtually impossible. DDOT has been out there. DDOT has put down strips, but the strips have come back up. DDOT has been out there to put stop signs in the middle street, and they have come down again. Mrs. Lewis has said early, a lot of work has been done on Michigan Avenue. In front of the Hospital for Sick Children, we have refurnished the park, but the traffic is still heavy. The signs are just, I think the signs were painted less than 8 months ago, and they're gone again. So they have been there, they have responded to us, but as she said earlier, this is shoddy work that's been done.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
I appreciate y'all mentioning it. I've also heard some of the concerns about some of the sidewalk repairs, where the concrete on the sidewalks is deteriorating shortly after it's been installed. So that's a huge issue too. So I want to thank you both for that. I'm going to go next, if I could, to Mr. Melgarejo.
Thank you, Councilor McDuffie. Also want to acknowledge Chairwoman Che. Personally, I don't feel happy with you, but I'm going to focus on my testimony.
You have 3 minutes to do it.
Yeah. My name is Pablo Melgarejo, and I live on 12th and Allison Street, Northeast. On Monday, our taxpayers and residents of my area had the misfortune to hear that once again, this time in the case of EOA's proposal development at St. Joseph Seminar, we have seen this disregarded and treated in a patronizing manner regarding our concerns about the rampant development happening here, especially in my neighborhood. The main hope we had to right-size the project was based on traffic and parking, but the zoning commissioners decided that one cosmetic fix on one intersection was enough to resolve their concerns, and that ours were irrelevant. We do not need band-aids on this problem. We need systematic review of the situation. We want no more new development to begin until we have a comprehensive liability study and all issues below are addressed. On traffic, as you probably know, we have around 289,000 registered vehicles in the District of Columbia. And each day, over 200,000 additional vehicles enter the District of Columbia. As you can see, the increased vehicles associated with the new development will make driving here more difficult and dangerous. In 2015, several area residents worked together to produce a detailed 17-page Allison Street traffic survey. The study has a number of recommendations for increasing public safety, including for the 12 and 13 block of Allison Street to be torn away. These changes would ease the recurrent treatment of head-on collisions and accidents taking place along Allison Street, as well as where it intersects with South Dakota Avenue, Sargent Road, and 12th Street. So far, there has been no district government action taken with respect to the survey. I would like to just point out, since I'm running out of time. The traffic studies, as articulated by an ANC commissioner at public meeting, traffic studies paid for by developers do not provide a picture of what things will look like after the development. And a study of just one portion of a neighborhood does not give the full picture of the impact of approximately 6,960 additional residential units coming online around here soon. But the study paid by EYA, for example, acknowledges the famous 12th and Allison intersection has multiple failures, earning several E's and F's in a grade range where A is the best and F is the worst. The study that the southbound approaches to the intersection of Sargent and Allison and 12th and Allison operate in unacceptable conditions. But the study concludes that since all these unacceptable conditions predate the development, and the incremental increase in delay at each location is below DDOT's traffic impact thresholds.
Mr. Melgar, your time has expired. I noticed that you have pretty extensive written testimony. We'd love it if you could submit that to the committee for the record.
I did submit it.
Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Council Member. My name is Carlos Davis. I'm president of Woodridge South Community Association. I've been president of the association for the past 4 years and vice president for 2 years before that. And like many of the other community and civic associations, I've been dealing with issues across multiple agencies for some time. In May of 2014, the council member and his staff came to the Woodridge South Community's aid and held a walkthrough. The following are the outstanding issues relative to DDOT from that time. The intersection of Bladensburg Road Northeast and South Dakota Avenue has raised many issues for drivers due to the traffic signal timing. Drivers rush to make the turn left off of Bladensburg Road heading east off of South Dakota Avenue, and the same situation arises for drivers heading east on Bladensburg Road turning left onto South Dakota Avenue. We requested a traffic signal review that remains outstanding. The intersection of Eastern Avenue and Rhode Island Avenue Northeast has raised many issues for drivers due to the traffic signal timing. Heading east on Rhode Island Avenue Northeast, there is traffic backed up all the way to Monroe Street Northeast. Drivers heading north on Eastern Avenue Northeast and taking a left onto Rhode Island Avenue also experience backup due to traffic signal management. The intersection of Fort Lincoln Drive and Eastern Avenue Northeast has raised many issues for drivers, also due to traffic signal timing. An even growing concern amongst the community is the Costco and other development and the traffic heading north and south on Fort Lincoln Drive Northeast off of Bladensburg Road Northeast. The lighting on the 2800 block of Franklin Street and the 2800 block of Evart Street is very dim. Additional lighting or stronger bulbs were requested to strengthen public safety, and later we added a request to have the trees cut back to at least expose the existing lighting. The Woodridge South Community Association has several triangle lands within our area, and we've requested beautification and new canopies put in. I thought I had 5 minutes since I represented a group, but I'll go faster.
We made an announcement a little while ago because we would have run out of time.
Not a problem. I will make it shorter. There are many issues around CSX, railways. We even became a part of 5x5, where 5 presidents from different organizations came together because we realized that we were dealing with whack-a-mole. So we put ourselves together, became 5x5. That became known to the city administrator. He came out and did a walkthrough, and we still have outstanding DDOT issues that we can get from the MOCR or from the city administrator's office. I thank you for this opportunity and hope that some results will come of it.
No, I appreciate you being here to testify, Mr. Davis, as I do appreciate everybody being here this evening to testify. And if you could submit your testimony in writing. I know that, again, I skimmed the document that I received from DDOT a little earlier. I believe some of the issues that were on that outstanding punch list of items have been, if not resolved, are included with an update here. So I don't know that it encompasses everything that was outstanding, and so I know that you deserve, as well as a lot of the other civic associations and ANCs that have had outstanding items on DDOT's radar for a while, some answers to those. And to the extent something has been resolved, I'm sure you all would like to know it, although you probably would see it if it had been resolved, which means there are probably a number of items that remain unresolved to date. And so we'll be sure to follow up to make sure you get the information that we received today, but as well to have a more specific follow-up with the mayor's office about the status of those outstanding items.
Thank you.
And Mr. Melgarejo, I'll mention to you, as I mentioned to Ms. Caroline Petty earlier, I'd love to make sure you have an opportunity to review the proper planning for future growth amendment act of 2017 that I introduced earlier this year. Being mindful of the concerns of development in Ward 5, but even going beyond that, in the hat that I wear as chair of the Committee on Business and Economic Development, I've heard similar concerns in other parts of the city as well with the scale of the development. We understand that we have a lot of residents moving into the city, I think still to the tune of 1,000 net per month, which means that they need to live somewhere, and we have to figure out how to house them, which puts a lot of pressure on our existing housing stock, which is why you see a lot of the prices continue to go up. And it's a serious issue for residents who are here and want to stay here, particularly our seniors who've been here for decades and should be able to enjoy the prosperous years when they had to suffer through some of the more challenging times of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so I appreciate the concern you're raising, but I want to make sure that you get a copy of that, because it will require DDOT to do a traffic study every 2 years. It would also have DDOT and the Office of Planning, as a matter of fact, look to the future to see how future economic development would impact neighborhoods. So there's not just a specific project on a specific community, but taking a more comprehensive look of what the impact is going to be on the quality of life of communities across the city. And so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that to you, as I mentioned it earlier. I'm not sure if you were here. So again, and I want to also mention to Mr. Thomas and Ms. Lewis, I appreciate you all really working with my office and working with both DDOT and the MOCRs. I know that there have been a number of items that you all have had that have been outstanding for a while, and some of which I believe have been addressed.
Yes.
And I appreciate you mentioning that, because I know a lot of times they sit over there and they only hear the criticism, but the reality is there are still some things that need to be addressed, and we hope we can get some answers for you tonight, if not shortly thereafter, this roundtable, so that you all have updates and you can provide those to your community. So thank you all for your testimony this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could have Jed Ela or Ella, E-L-A is the last name? No? How about, okay. Bobby Akins? All right, perfect. Alex Alonso? Arnold? Mercy Arnold is here. Johnson, you fill up the last seat, and then we're going to move on to the to our government witness and have the director of the Department of.
I think somebody else was added right next to me.
So here's what we'll do. We're going to have one more panel after this. Here's the problem, guys, and you all. I really appreciate you all because Ms. Steiner and I know Commissioner Mann, you all have been here for a really long time. We only have this room for about another. And if you all are okay with us not hearing from the director, then I'll have all the folks who are seated in the audience at least lodge their concerns, and so the record is complete. So I want to make sure we have at least a little time to hear from Director Dormsjo, although I'm sure he wouldn't mind if he got a pass this evening. But I got to hear from. Okay, all right. So if we could have you all do your 3 minutes, we're going to start with you, sir.
Yes, my name is Campbell Johnson. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, and I'm chair of the Urban Housing Alliance, which is a Washington, D.C. Group which fights displacement of low and moderate income residents, and I'm here representing the Alliance tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to have you come into our community. As I mentioned, I'm third generation Washingtonian. My family has owned the house I live in since 1920. And my mother is a magna cum laude graduate of Howard University. Her brother was a graduate as a surgeon. Another brother was a counselor and had his career there. I went to McKinley High School and thereafter San Francisco State University and got an MBA from the Wharton School. I'm a former bank controller, executive vice president of a national development finance firm, and also I've worked in DC as vice president of the DC Private Industry Council and director of the Community Business Center. Particular concerns in my community relate to the fact of towed cars for street sweeping on, say, 2nd Street in that neighborhood that are towed right around the corner onto Rhode Island Avenue so that you are in another tow-away zone in 3 hours. This is outrageous. This is, you might as well just shake me down when I come out the door and ask for money. That is something that needs to be corrected. I've talked with the tow truck drivers, and yet there were about 5 double-towed cars on Rhode Island Avenue when I go out from my house in the 100 block today. And that just does not make sense to get 2 tickets, one of which you weren't even in your car to get. Second thing, and I really trust that you will be addressing that first issue. The second thing is the roll-off restricted parking. I've got it behind my house. Now, I have a handicap sticker, and behind my house on T Street, I've got it now for 4 months. It's going to be restricted. That's a little bit outrageous, I think. And, it's not the kind of thing that makes for someone to be able to continue living in the community without having to run through extreme problems with regard to finding a place to legally park. The foundation also of the neighbor's house, where they're doing a lot of roll-off and digging into the basement of their property, is causing problems for my house. I'll let it go with those points and give you the remainder of my presentation in writing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Arnold?
Good evening, Councilmember McDuffie. Thank you for holding this hearing. I will try to keep it brief. I've submitted written testimony for the record. I want to make 3 points and offer 4 apologies. Number 1, in my testimony, I did not know how to spell Priscilla. So please correct that. Second, in my testimony, I refer to Uber. I think we need to start doing a congestion management protocol change for the Department of Transportation, because I don't think they have a congestion management protocol. And the reality is that this section of the city, there is not functional planning for east to west traffic. Now, if you go down Connecticut Avenue from Bethesda, they have lane change signs. During one part of rush hour, there are 3 lanes down Connecticut in and 2 lanes out. They need to do that on Rhode Island Avenue, New York Avenue, Bladensburg Avenue, and H Street, wherever possible. Because right now, those 4 streets are rivers during AM and PM rush. God forbid something happen, you cannot get across those rivers. And those rivers are producing floods of cars in Ward 5, so that you cannot get across Ward 5 if something were to happen. Now, I do want to thank DDOT for the sidewalks on Decatur Street to South Dakota Avenue. Those really improve the quality of life. I also need to change the date on my testimony. My bottom line is that establishing an enhanced congestion management zone or zones that encompass the center of the city by time of day would include a rush hour AM and PM plan for the nearly impenetrable rivers that K Street, 14th Street, Rhode Island Avenue, New York Avenue, and Bladensburg Avenue become during rush hour. So the idea that we plan for what happens at 4 o'clock in the morning, that's insufficient, because the real problem is during rush hour. And then as a personal matter, I came here 30 years ago as a visitor. And I missed a very important train because the Orange Line platform at Metro Center does not tell you which stairway to go to get the train to Union Station. Now, Glenmont, Shady Grove, Silver Spring, all of that is confusing for tourists. There are a lot of tourists. When you go in the L'Enfant Plaza station, they tell you this train will take you to this particular, tourist attraction, and that train will take you to the other. So fixing that Metro Center thing is just a personal pet peeve. And then my other grave concern is they're about to tear up Fort Totten Metro Station and make some significant changes up there. And while I was not an elder when I moved to this city 25 years ago, I'm an elder now. And getting from the E2 bus to the bus that goes up New Hampshire Avenue, you can't make that transition, even if you have the bus schedule. So they need to consolidate all the buses on one side of the bridge at Fort Totten.
And thank you for your
Thank
testimony,
you,
Ms. Arnold.
and I appreciate your time. I gotta
Thank you very
go.
much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Next.
Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. Thank you for holding this roundtable. I'm coming to talk about an issue facing me and my neighbors for nearly 2 years now. We've been in contact with DDOT for that entire time and have largely been ignored or met with false promises. The problem is laid out pretty extensively in my written testimony, including some pictures, or a lot of pictures. However, at the core is the Board of Zoning, DCRA, and DDOT approved construction of a new home on a very narrow plot that borders the access route to the alley behind our homes. The zoning variances that were provided and the permits that DDOT provided have very negatively affected us. This is done without notice to us as neighbors because the zoning variance petition was either not sent to our ANC or I know it wasn't sent to our ANC, and I don't know what ANC it was sent to, but we didn't provide any input on it. DDOT is involved because the property owner either currently intends, or I don't know if he's given up on that, but he intends to construct a fence, and you can see it in Exhibit 3 in my written testimony. And he intends to fence in a parking space behind his home that would cut off the entire access to the alley behind all of our homes on the 1400 block of 3rd Street Northwest and New Jersey Avenue Northwest. And DDOT basically says he has the right to do that. And in our conversations with DDOT, which have included the property owner, they say that we're only entitled to a 10-foot alley. But however, everyone, including the DDOT representatives that actually have come out to the alley and the owner of this house, agree that it's completely physically impossible for all of us to operate in an alley that's 10 foot wide. The alley for the last 50 years, according to my neighbors that are here with me today, that have lived there for over 50 years, the alley has never been 10 foot wide, and it can't be 10 foot wide in order for us to actually get into the alley. So the only thing that's allowing us to access it now is because the property owner at 1420, he can't access his own home if the alley was 10 foot wide. So DDOT is not the one that's solving our problems, he is. So there's been probably over 50 emails, which is in my written testimony, between myself and DDOT and other neighbors, a few meetings with DDOT. It's all in my written testimony. They make promises, they don't follow through. And frankly, there's a solution in sight, but all it requires is DDOT to actually do what they say they're going to do, and they don't do it. So I hope that there's someone that will follow up with me to actually do something.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll make sure we follow up. And we've got folks from DDOT who are here. I can't guarantee you'll be satisfied with the response, but in terms of the follow-up, you'll definitely get that on this issue. And I appreciate the extensive testimony and the record that you've created by providing that as well. Next.
All right, Council Member, thank you for having me. Do I have the last word tonight? Is that? Am I not?
Say the penultimate word. You got the.
Okay, but for Mr. Dormjo. So, as many other residents have expressed, Mr. Dormjo, the only thing I'd like to say is, please fix Franklin Street. It's a huge problem for a large number of residents in our neighborhood. I live at the intersection of 18th and Franklin. Other residents have expressed the challenges at 13th. But really it's from South Dakota Avenue all the way to almost North Capitol Street that we have this truck issue. And just some background, I've worked with Kevin Malone of Langdon to work with DDOT to try to get answers to these questions. And I agree wholeheartedly that attrition has been a big challenge for us in dealing with one person to another. We are appreciative of the report that was issued in May. My only concern with that report was that it was intended for a wide area of our neighborhood, Langdon, Woodridge, that area, and it only specifically addressed Queens Chapel to 20th Street. Specifically, the intersection of 18th and Franklin was never addressed in any of the traffic counts that were done, speeding that was done. And specifically for us at the intersection of 18th and Franklin, you've got 2 bus stations, a park, a library, and a school. So that intersection gets a lot of use. And the challenge is that if you drive down there, it's at the bottom of 2 hills. So I'll regularly see people a block and a half up the hill, see the light turning yellow, and then start to fly through. I was there a couple months ago where 2 dump trucks that were flying down from 20th to 18th, the bus stops, they speed up, swerve around oncoming traffic through an intersection where children are waiting, almost hit 2 cars, and both of the trucks run the red light. And that happens regularly. So it's a miracle to me that no one has been injured at that intersection yet. But my point is, I would like to see that traffic study revisited. The traffic counts, the speed counts. The one thing that was said in the report was that Franklin Street is an arterial roadway, but on the exhibits that were presented in the traffic study, between 18th and the end of basically along the park on Franklin is supposed to be a local street. So the truck access lanes go from Rhode Island Avenue down Franklin to 18th. They stop, they don't go anywhere. And essentially the plan for trucks in that area is discontinuous. It doesn't make sense. There's no actual way for trucks to get through. So if you guys could revisit that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
For testifying this evening. I just want to make sure that Mr. Alonzo, was my office also looped in on the issue that you were dealing with DDOT on, just to make sure on the wall?
I don't believe we've ever been in contact with you. I've never been in contact with your office.
Okay, because I was asking my staff, and it didn't sound familiar to me. I just want to make sure, but we'll make sure we follow up.
Okay, it sounds like one of my other neighbors may have been in contact.
But the mayor's office was involved.
The mayor's office
gotcha.
was involved.
I think somebody
Our
is
ANC
here.
commissioner contacted your office.
Okay.
You know, the emails indicate that we've had 2 different associate directors of DDOT. Both were actually physically in our alley.
Okay. All right.
And we've had multiple
We'll make sure we
emails
follow up. I
with
know
them.
the mayor's office is also here this evening too, so we'll get a status update from them. Thank you all for your testimony this evening. Sure. We'll move quickly if we could, because again, we may have another 20 minutes, if that, before we literally, the lights go out and the mics get cut off. But it's important to make sure that we had everybody have an opportunity to put these things on the record. Mr. Domshow, Director of the District Department of Transportation, come forward, please. Thank you for being here, Mr. Domshow. You can begin your testimony whenever you're ready. If you don't mind, just the abbreviated version, if that's possible. I know you got a lot of things you want to respond to, but there are also some questions you want to try to fit in if possible. But
Sure.
I will indulge you if you're going to be responding directly to some of the concerns you've heard this evening.
Of course. Thank you. Good evening, Councilmember McDuffie and staff of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. For the record, my name is Leif Dormsjo. I'm the Director of the District Department of Transportation, or DDOT. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify here tonight at this public oversight roundtable about DDOT's responsiveness to the council and residents' inquiries. I also want to specifically thank the citizens who turned out tonight. However hard it is to receive negative criticism, I will say it is a testament to the strength of this community that so many of your neighbors displayed civic activism and prepared for tonight's roundtable, and many of them have stayed till the end. One of the highest priorities over the past 2.5 years that I have served as the DDOT director has been creating transparency and instilling a culture of safety and responsibility at DDOT. The residents of the District of Columbia are our customers, and we always strive to provide great customer service. Any lapse in our full and robust communication, I want to take full personal responsibility for. I do agree with an earlier witness who said that leadership matters, and I do want to acknowledge that our failures tonight are my failures, and I will redouble my own efforts and that of my staff to do right by the community. I think it's important that citizens believe in their government and that their government is working hard for them. And furthermore, I think we need, as government officials, we need to demonstrate positive evidence that our citizens' issues are being addressed with care and compassion, and it is our duty to do better. I take the criticism very seriously and have endeavored to try to not be too defensive in hearing the direct feedback from our customers. With that, I did want to actually mention about a dozen things that I wanted to follow up with the council and the committee on in the future, and then also with my own staff. There were things embedded in statements made by witnesses tonight that I found to be very thought-provoking and potentially actionable. So there were a lot of really good ideas expressed tonight, and I'd just like to quickly go over some of them. I do think it is appropriate that the district government develop a commercial truck inspection unit. I frankly find it somewhat surprising that we really don't have that type of joint group between MPD, DPW, and DDOT. In other jurisdictions where I've worked, that has been part and parcel with transportation and law enforcement. Baltimore City, Maryland State Highway Administration, the Maryland Transportation Authority all have those types of units. And I think we could really focus on weight and oversized vehicles if we had that type of unit. I'll bring that up with the police chief and the DPW director. I also think that we can tighten up the process around the truck manifest reviews and the approval and the routing. That was mentioned earlier. I frankly think that by going to meet with the top 10 commercial truck carriers from a permit perspective and talking to them about the routes that their drivers are using, that was kind of a suggestion that came from the Profish owner, but also another member of the community. So I think zeroing in on those manifests is a very good idea. There were comments with regard to the traffic counts, and if we're wrong on the traffic counts, by all means, we'll acknowledge that. One of the tools that we have at our disposal more recently is to do video traffic counts, which would allow us to do multiple 24-hour periods rather than just having an observer in the field. So I acknowledge that there are limitations by taking traffic counts the old-fashioned way, and you can get richer data, not just volume, but you can get vehicle type and other classification information about the vehicles by using video technology. So that's certainly something that I think we can commit to doing. I do think that it's worth considering from a city or ward level establishing some caps on the number of truck permits that are issued, liquor licenses, VPP permits, all of these things. I would say by comparison to other cities, there's really no governance on the absolute number of kind of construction permits, truck permits. There's a very permissive approach to establishment of places that sell alcohol. We're very permissive about issuance of visitors parking passes. All these things put pressure on neighborhoods. And where that line is, I'm not sure, but I think we have to have a candid conversation about that. I also think it's worth thinking about the cheap cost to park a vehicle downtown and whether or not the city wants to do something about that, because the negative externalities of cars driving from Maryland and Virginia through neighborhoods are basically borne by the people in this room, and part of the issue there is it's very cheap to drive a car and park downtown in this city, and the effects are not offset, in terms of and the behavioral effects of a higher tax on parking and some other policies around parking, I think are worth considering. There was mention of needing to analyze Uber and Lyft route selection algorithms, and I think that that's a very worthwhile thing to pursue. We have opened up more data sharing with those ride-sharing companies. They are somewhat sensitive about that information, but the example that was provided by one of the witnesses regarding the vehicles using alleys, that's not the first time I've heard that. And there's also concerns about other types of route analysis that might be bringing more Uber traffic by a school or another area that we would like to safeguard more. So that's a legitimate suggestion and something that we'll follow up on. There was a criticism from, I think, several of the witnesses about the opaque nature of some of our responses when we provide a report about our traffic analysis. And it's been customary at DDOT not to provide some of the raw or aggregate speed and traffic data as part of our standard response. And I would commit that we can change that. And I think we need to open up and be more transparent about the information that we've collected. So I think that was a fair criticism and something that we can do in relatively short order. I do also agree, there was testimony earlier tonight about the advantages of DC transport relative to metro access, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Although that's not something, the program requirements and contours are not something I directly control. It is our administration. I'd certainly be willing to talk to the director of the for-hire vehicles agency and the budget director for the city administrator to lobby on behalf of changes there. There was mention of vacancies or unmanned school crossing guard locations, and we have had some issues with retention, but thanks to budget action by the mayor and city council, there are more positions for school crossing guards, and also 3 specific community liaisons that was put into the budget with your support. And I've directed my staff to begin an early hiring process where we will make offers to people in those 2 categories prior to October 1st when the fiscal year 18 dollars come online. So that's a commitment to get more community focused personnel on the DDOT team as quickly as possible to carry out our commitment to honor your budget increase. There was several witnesses who spoke with regard to dumpster locations. We now have much more geographic information system, or GIS, data, locational information about all sorts of different assets and permits. And so I think what we're going to do is think of ways to filter for dumpster locations and be more cognizant of the over-concentration, and we may adjust some of our policies to limit the presence of more than one dumpster within a certain linear distance. We have made some changes to the dumpster policies that raise the cost for the larger containers and put in tighter time limits, but they are relatively low cost to the contractor relative to their overall project. But people should also keep in mind having a dumpster, if it's used properly, will reduce the number of truck trips that may be coming to a construction site. So we've got to strike a balance there, but using GIS information to safeguard some of the legitimate concerns that were expressed earlier tonight, I think is valid. There was several witnesses who talked about how they repeatedly engaged with 311 and/or DDOT. We have tried over the last year or so with our Transtat process to really focus on duplicates that are in our system, because we know that those are, while all service requests are important to us and we want to honor a commitment to resolution of service requests, we want to also gauge that frustration factor and duplicates are a pretty good indicator that people aren't getting what they need in terms of resolution. Even if it's just a good explanation of why we can't do something, duplicates are still a good indicator of where we need to concentrate. I'm not sure we're all the way there, given some of the testimony from tonight and the actual service history information that was provided by some of the very prepared citizens that showed up tonight. Two other points. I think fundamentally, if ridership on Metro, both subway and bus, does not rebound within the next 12 months, and we continue to have the construction intensity around the district that limits public space and parking and has kind of a residual traffic congestion impact. And the third real significant stressor on our traffic is some of the large-scale infrastructure work that's being done either by private parties, like the 395 project, or by us at DDOT, certain bridge projects like South Capitol Street Bridge. I think the city's going to have to get their mind around whether or not congestion pricing is something that needs to be introduced to address you know, the commuter traffic, which you know, is really getting pushed off the arterial streets that it's intended to carry and into the neighborhoods. And if there's either something done on parking costs or some other pricing instrument, absent that, I'm somewhat pessimistic about things improving citywide from a traffic management perspective. There was a witness towards the tail end of the roundtable that spoke of the deficiencies with the Metro signage, and I completely agree with that. And there are some ideas from other transit properties around the world that would greatly simplify and help with some of those transfers, and not just for tourists, but even citizens. I get lost sometimes in the Metro system myself because every location looks pretty much exactly the same.
Right. And Director Dorms, I don't know how much you have on your list, but there's one particular thing I need you to address because we're up against the clock and literally have maybe 5 minutes. Project Action had some witnesses who testified about pedestrian inaccessibility along 2900 block of Newton. I know they tweeted my office, and I believe they tweeted your agency. Do you have any updates about that specifically?
I don't have any when that. I'm well aware of the event, and I've asked my team to do some analysis of the situation there, but I don't have anything that's like hot off the presses with regard to that.
Is there one last thing you need to say before I wrap this up? And just so folks know, when I say wrap it up, I just mean this roundtable. This process obviously is going to go on a lot longer to get answers and results to all the things that have been mentioned. But is there any final thought that you have before?
No, other than to thank you for your leadership in pulling this roundtable together, and it's very, very productive from our end to get a straight customer report from so many people. This helps us get better, and I just ask that you and others be patient and continue to support us in the way that you have.
Well, I appreciate your testimony that you crafted it to address specific concerns that you heard. I know you were here the entire time, and so it sounds like you were listening. And I know that these roundtables typically bring out residents who are critical of agencies, but that's precisely what we need to happen. This is what this process is all about, to let agencies and let the government, both the council and the executive, know when they have grievances that need to be redressed. And that's precisely what we heard this evening. It's not to suggest that we don't have an agency full of hardworking, dedicated staff, because I personally know that to be the case, that there are people within that agency, lots of them, who work really hard on a day in, day out basis to make sure that they are delivering services for residents and visitors across the District of Columbia. However, the bottom line, and hopefully you understand the takeaway, is that residents of Ward 5 and others across the district need you and the agency to do better. We need you and the agency to do better. I appreciate your request for patience, but a lot of folks in here have been patient. And I don't mean just the 3.5, 4 hours you all have been here today, but we're talking about months and months of waiting for requests to be fulfilled. And so we need you to be perhaps a little bit more expeditious in terms of responding to those things. We will continue to try to be patient, but I know Ward 5, and I know that residents only have so much patience. And I don't blame them for it, because a lot of these things are serious and they're really safety risks that are inherent in some of the problems that they're facing. As I said, you were present for the entire roundtable, so you heard all the concerns that residents have been raised. Many of them are outstanding concerns, which I think you're already familiar with, and I know you've responded to some of them. Some of them are new concerns that we need to get a response to, and we're going to have to follow up even after the close of this hearing to make sure we get responses to everybody. I will say this, it is frustrating when DDOT does a study, looks at an issue, and then comes back and say, you know what, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to take any action, because for whatever reason, whether it's some federal reg or a traffic count, you all decided there's nothing that you can do, but the quality of life issue remains. The safety issues remain. It is incredibly frustrating. I've been out to these sites, I've seen these things myself, so essentially you all say, deal with it, and that's unacceptable. And I know you personally, I know your reputation, and I don't know that's not what you intend to say, but that's how it's received by residents when there's no solution or resolution offered by their government to address an issue that they have faced with day in and day out. And so we need that to change. Saying deal with it is not acceptable. I'm not going to tolerate it. And I don't think you are as well. And so I appreciate you raising specifically some things that you want to do to address some of the concerns you heard tonight. I heard you say commercial truck inspections unit, working with MPD. That is something palpable. That's something tangible. We'd love to see that happen. You're going to work on the truck manifest reviews and the routing issues that we heard from all these residents from 13th and Franklin. You want to put caps on the number of truck permits issued, perhaps. That's something that you're going to look at. I will say this, I appreciate those suggestions, those solutions, but it's been a long time coming, and actions speak louder than words, right? So we need actions to accompany the things that you just mentioned tonight, because as I stated earlier, residents are incredibly frustrated. I'm incredibly frustrated. In fact, residents are angry with the state of affairs that they're faced with right here with their interactions with DDOT, and they want action, and I hope that action is what's going to follow this roundtable that we had. So my request to you is specifically to circle back with the committee and Chairperson Che in my office with a specific timeline and a dedicated point of contact to follow up on everything that remains outstanding. I'm not saying things are going to happen overnight, but I think if the communication lines are more open and it's increased and it's more transparent, then I think everybody will be better served as a result of that. And so that's my ask to you, and the takeaway I hope that we have from this hearing. I want to thank everybody who came out this evening for being here, including Councilmember Che, who chairs the committee, as well as you and all the residents who have been here patiently waiting to either testify, or those like Ms. Steiner and Commissioner Manning, and I saw Commissioner Thompson and others who did not have an opportunity to testify. You all know how to get me. And I'm no stranger, and so we'll make sure that your concerns are lodged with my office and that they're included into the record of this roundtable. There being no other business before the Committee on Transportation and Environment, the time is now 9:59 p.m. 1 minute before they're going to kick us out of here, and this roundtable stands adjourned.